Hello everyone. Vol'jin Shadows of the Horde is in my opinion a great book and definitely worth your money. If you're still planning on buying it, be warned, there will be spoilers in this video. As always, this will be the short version of the story. If you want to know all the details, buy the book. Let's begin, shall we? The story of Shadows of the Horde takes place after Vol'jin gets assassinated. He's found by his old friend Chen Stormstout, who takes him to the Shadowpen Monastery. Vol'jin was not the only one who Chen brought to the monastery. Earlier he had found a human named Tirafan who had fallen at the Battle of the Serpent's Heart. Taranzu allows Vol'jin to stay even though he doesn't want anything to do with the Horde Alliance conflicts. Taranzu has the plan in mind of making Vol'jin and Tirafan interact with each other because they both represent a part of the Pandaren philosophy. Taranzu describes Vol'jin as being very Tushui and Tirafan as very Hojin. By placing them together, Taranzu hopes that they will balance each other out and that he himself might learn something from observing them and watching their behavior. For those unaware, the philosophies are described as the following. Tushui is the way of a principled life. Followers of this discipline believe there's a moral certainty to the world, one correct path of right and wrong. These values are immutable and must be preserved no matter what the cost. Simply put, Tushui is the way of the mind and a lot of thinking.
Patience is the highest virtue. Discipline and practice lead us to our full potential.
Hojin is marked by practical and decisive action. Followers of this discipline believe that morals and ideas are not absolute, but they change with circumstances. Simply put, Hojin is the way of action.
The greatest virtue is the will to act. The time to act is always now.
It's interesting to note that Vol'jin, although part of the Horde, is described as Tushui, and Tirafan, although part of the Alliance, is described as Hojin. Anyways, Vol'jin starts his recovery with the aid of Tirafan. His time spent in the monastery teaches him more about humans, how fragile they are, how to deal with their mortality, but still fight for what they believe is right. He also trains with the monks, which is not that easy since Vol'jin is a shadow hunter. Shadow hunters are special amongst the trolls because they have a strong connection with the Loa, who are like primal gods who sometimes grant them powers or visions. You can compare them to, for example, the light, where paladins and priests take their power from. Shadow hunters master chaos in their fighting style, while monks try to achieve balance with theirs. Despite that big difference, Vol'jin trains and he learns. He learns very fast. At one point, Vol'jin receives a vision where he sees the ships with Zandalari crests on them. At first he thinks it's a vision of a long time past, and then he believes it's a vision of a possible future for him. A vision granted by the Loa teasing him with a future of conquest. Little did Vol'jin know that this vision was not for his future, but a warning of the coming Zandalari invasion. Eventually he would figure it out and he warned Taranzu. As he does this, he asks for maps to indicate what he has seen, but the maps do not show the island of this vision. That's because the island in his vision is the Isle of Thunder. The invading Zandalari trolls, as well as Amani trolls and the Gurubashi, are being led by Kalak. Kalak serves Vilnakdor, who was sent by King Arastakan. As we know, the trolls resurrected the Thunder King and allied with the Mogu. They want to team up and reclaim their fallen kingdoms. Vol'jin eventually figures out what's going on and he makes plans together with Taranzu and the others to set up defenses. The problem is, with the recent Mented invasion and the recent Sha problems, that the Shadowpen don't have that many monks to spare. Taranzu promises that he will try to enlist the aid of the Horde in the Alliance to fight the battle at the Isle of Thunder, while in the meantime, Vol'jin, Chen and Tirafan set out to slow the Zandalari invasion. They do a pretty good job until they walk into a trap set by Kalak. She captures Tirafan and forces the others to lay down their weapons. At that point they are captured, but Kalak does not imprison Vol'jin right away because she has an offer for him. She wants him and his Darkspear tribe to join them in reclaiming the fallen empire of the trolls. This offer is very tempting for Vol'jin. Don't forget that Garrosh, leader of his former family, just tried to kill him. A place in a new world order, a home for his Darkspear trolls, standing at the side of Kalak as he had done for Thrall, is an offer only a fool would refuse. And yet he does refuse it. What you need to understand is that a shadow hunter's job is to do what is best for the trolls. Throughout the story he sees vision of the history of the trolls from their creation, where they made their bond with the Loa, to the rise of the Zandalari Empire, where they acquired riches and no longer relied on the Loa. The visions lead him all the way to the fall of the Troll Empire, one that they still try to reclaim even to this day. Along those visions, he sees how shadow hunters of the past turn away from the Zandalari as they no longer do what is best for the trolls, as they no longer respect the Loas as they used to. So the conclusion Vol'jin draws is that what they are trying to do, reclaim a kingdom of old, is not what is best for the trolls. He lives in the reality of today, and today the Darkspear are his family, and the Darkspear are part of the Horde, which makes the Horde his family. The fate of the Horde and trolls were undeniably intertwined. To act if it wasn't the truth would be complete folly. The past be important. We can and must be learning from it, but it cannot shackle us. The old ways be valuable, but only as a foundation for the future we choose to be building. With that knowledge, he sets out to free his comrades and do as much damage to the Zandalari troops as he can. They assassinate the officers in the night, they blow up a ship, and they escape to the monastery. There, Vol'jin had the plan of leaving the monastery and find a better location for the counterattack, but Taranzu refuses to leave. The location of the monastery is where they planned the Pandaren rebellion to overthrow the Mogu so many years ago, and he would not give up the monastery. That means they had to defend themselves, 33 versus an army of Zandalari, Armani, Kurubashi and a couple of Mogu, reaching in the numbers of 500. The battle began, and they tried to stop them as much as possible, but eventually they were pushed back into the monastery. By that time 33 had already become 14, and the only one who didn't seem to have been fighting at all was Taranzu. Now don't get me wrong, he had been fighting, he's just such a badass that nobody can touch him. At one point in the fight, a Mogu came charging towards Vol'jin with his spear, and he would have impaled him was it not for Tirafan. Tirafan pushed Vol'jin out of the way and took the spear straight to the belly. Taranzu jumped in with a flying kick and he punched straight through the Mogu, quickly disposing of him. Which leads to the final confrontation in this battle, and this was between Vol'jin and a pissed off Kalak. She wasn't only pissed off because Vol'jin refused to join her, but she also had a little bit of a crush on him. In the end, Vol'jin manages to get the upper hand by using his monk skills, which he uses to punch straight through her windpipe. At the death of their leader and the Mogu, the remaining trolls started to retreat, and Taranzu told the remaining to flee or they would lose their lives here and there, and so they did. At that point in time, Vol'jin turns to Tirafan, who is still impaled with the spear, and he communicates with the Loa. Bon Samdi, the Loa of the dead, agrees to not take Tirafan just yet, because of all the troll spirits Vol'jin and Tirafan had sent him, and all the spirits Vol'jin promises that will come. The day is saved, and the rest of the events at the Isle of Thunder we already know. We stop the Thunder King and the Zandalari invasion. Vol'jin has made his choice of who he will become, and he decides that what Garrosh is doing is not good for the family. It will make not only his people, but the family of the Horde suffer, and that is not who Vol'jin was, is, or wants to be. He gets ready to make a stand and to start a rebellion, to overthrow a war chief who no longer does what is best for his people, but what is best for himself. And that's the end of the story. Now I could never tell it as well as it was written, because it's a very philosophical story combined with some kick-ass action and the journey Vol'jin takes to find himself. There are a few interesting lore things that I do want to point out before we end this video. It's said that the Mogu, despite being unorganized, have been busy with breeding. It is not explained how Mogu breed, but it's interesting that they do, considering that we've only seen 2 female Mogu in the Throne of Thunder. I haven't really told about Chen's part in the story, but that's because this is the general storyline and it doesn't really add to it. What is interesting to note that throughout the story Chen falls in love with Yalia Sage Whisper and she feels the same for him. He envisions them together with a new brewery and a couple of panda cups, and to Chen, the old wanderer, the vision of this future seems pretty damn good. There were 2 theories about the creation of Azeroth and the universe. One was that the universe was created as a whole by a single all-powerful entity, while the other said that a catastrophic cosmic explosion sent the infamous world spinning out into the vastness of the Great Dark. In this book, Vol'jin has a vision. He watched stars explode in the night sky rich with explosions. He watched Azeroth coalesce from nothing. These 2 lines favor the Big Bang Theory over the one that states that Azeroth was created by a single entity. In the same vision, Vol'jin imagines a gigantic scale where he measures himself, a troll, a shadow hunter, to others. When he measures himself to the Zandalari or to Garrosh, the scale tips. They are not equals, and from their point of view, they would see themselves to be better than Vol'jin. When he measures himself with Chen, or Tirafan, or Rexxar, the scale remains balanced. He ponders this, for they are not trolls, but in their heart and in their spirit they are the same. Measured on this scale, they were every bit of troll at heart as he was. No matter what someone looks like or where they come from, in spirit we can all be equal when measured with one's actions. Which I found just a lesson we should all take to heart way more often. The final thing I want to note is a vision Vol'jin had at the start of the story as he's on the brink of death after his assassination. He talks with Bwonsamdi and he says, "You gonna be wishing you had surrendered, for the burden of your victory earned's gonna be one that will grind you into dust." Seeing how he survives this story and leads to the rebellion, I wonder when the moment comes that the burden of his victory will grind him into dust. Is this a clue of Vol'jin becoming the next war chief? Well, I'll leave that up to you. Hello everyone! The Illidan novel has been released, or it should be releasing soon depending on where you live in the world. Today I want to talk about the major storyline that you can find in the book. This means, a warning in advance, there are going to be spoilers for the novel. If you still want to read the novel for yourself, and I can recommend to read it for yourself because I thought it was pretty damn good, then let me just say thank you very much for watching so far, and please turn off the video right now. For those with no plans of buying the novel, for those sticking around, let's see what the Lord of Outland was planning to do with his time, why we were not prepared, and what the future might bring. Let's begin, shall we? For those who've never heard about Illidan before or are unaware of his storyline, Illidan's story truly begins during the War of the Ancients. This war is set around 10,000 years ago, in which Sargeras and the Burning Legion, they made contact with Queen Azshara and the Highborn, and they're working on bringing the Legion onto Azeroth. For this, they used the Well of Eternity, a great fountain of power, to create a portal strong enough to summon Sargeras. A resistance was formed, amongst them Illidan and his twin brother Malfurion Stormrage, and their longtime friend Tyrande Whisperwind, but Illidan figured that the best way of saving the planet would be to infiltrate the palace and act as a double agent. Illidan was pretty arrogant and confident about himself. He thought that he could do it all on his own, and in the process claim his destiny, perhaps even win Tyrande's love, but interacting with the Lord of the Legion, it often leaves a mark. In this case, Sargeras rewarded Illidan for joining them by burning out his amber eyes and replacing them with magical eyes, as well as branding him with magical tattoos. Sargeras had truly claimed Illidan as a creature of the Legion, but these changes, this whole new power, it was just the start of it. During this transformation, Sargeras granted Illidan a vision, a simple truth. He saw how the Legion in the great dark beyond conquered planet after planet. Azeroth was but one amongst millions upon millions of worlds, each in turn fell to the demonic onslaught. Sure enough, some of them were able to stand up for a while, but always the Legion would come back stronger than before. Sometimes the worlds were not simply destroyed, they were conquered and incorporated into the Legion structure, adding more soldiers to this war machine. One small speck amongst the millions, yet this was just one reality. There were a near infinite amount of universes, new ones were born each minute from the decisions made a heartbeat before, and in all of them, the Burning Legion marched, destroying world after world, and in every one of them, they marched triumphantly. The Burning Legion, invincible, unstoppable, dooming the universe to eternal darkness. This vision had been meant to convince Illidan that the Legion was invincible, that it was pointless to oppose the will of Sargeras, that the best and the only thing that he could do was to join the Legion and have a say in the remake of the universe. His mind had not crumbled though, he had remained who he was, and he had tried to do the unimaginable. Put a stop to the Legion invasion and, despite his own plans backfiring, with the aid of the Knight of Resistance, they were successful in preventing Sargeras and the Legion from conquering Azeroth, at least for that moment. They did lose the Well of Eternity in the process. Illidan did fail in winning over Tyrande's heart, since she loved his twin brother, and to top it all off, Illidan had seen the truth of it. He knew what none of them understood, that the Legion would come back one day to take another bite out of the planet, and he wanted his people to have the power to fight back. For this, he decided to use his vials filled with water from the original Well of Eternity, and he made a new one, but he was caught in the act and his people didn't understand. They didn't know what he knew. He lashed out at them, he killed a few of them, and he was branded a traitor. Instead of executing him on the spot, the Night Elves decided to imprison him for life. The dragon aspects, they knew of the dangers that this new Well of Eternity could present. They did not want another War of the Ancients, so they planted the World Tree Nordrassil. This tree would contain the powers of the well, it would prevent it from growing, and they also placed several blessings upon it, one of them giving the Night Elves immortality, including Illidan's Stormrage. For 10,000 years, the demon hunter who had once roamed the land hunting his prey had been held captive. Within a prison only big enough to take 9 steps, Illidan suffered for years, unable to escape. Not even death was a way out, since the spells that they placed upon him, it did not only keep him in place, they also made sure that he would be kept alive without the need for food or water. It healed any wounds that he might inflict upon himself, and 10,000 years were spent in darkness, with only the wardens and their leader Mayef Shadowsong to keep him company, and Illidan had learned to hate them. This is the point of time where the novel actually begins, the event shown in Warcraft 3, where the Legion has returned, and Tyrande decided that it would be a good idea to liberate Illidan and use him as a weapon against the Legion. She had no remorse, she had no apology for him, she had set him free only to be used as a weapon, and the worst of it all was that Illidan would still give it to her. His weapons, the Warglaze of Asenov, they'd been displayed triumphantly on weapon racks outside of his cell to taunt him, but as the magical bindings gave way, Illidan was able to reclaim them and he reclaimed his power. That detail, the question as to why was he allowed to keep his weapons if he was imprisoned, that detail is explained, but sadly, we still don't know the details as to how he obtained these blades during the War of the Ancients. Regardless, Tyrande leads Illidan outside. A minor confrontation with his twin brother takes place, but Illidan has no time for this. The realization that 10,000 years have come and gone, they urge him on to leave the prison far behind, so he uses some of his powers that he gathered to knock them out of his way, and he gets to work. He absorbs the skull of Kil'jaeden, increasing his power, obtaining the memories of this orcish warlock, and it made him look even more demonic. He did take out the Dreadlord Tychondrius, he saved the forest, but Tyrande and Malfurion, they do not agree with his actions, and they banish him from their lands.
So be it, brother.
Kil'jaeden makes contact with the Demon Hunter since he has a little job to do. His minion, the Lich King, is getting out of control and he wants Illidan to destroy the Frozen Throne. Illidan does his very best, but his plans are prevented by Malfurion and the Warder Mayef, who wants nothing more than to put the betrayer back into his cage. She's so hell-bent on this mission that she lied to Malfurion and she told him that his beloved Tyrande was killed, while in reality she was just swept away by the river. Despite all that had happened between them, Illidan would never do anything to harm Tyrande, and he tells his brother that together they could save the High Priestess. The Stormrage brothers team up. Tyrande is saved, but the same can't be said for Illidan. He has failed Kil'jaeden, and Kil'jaeden does not reward failure, so he decides to hide on Outland, with the Warder Mayef quickly going after him to recapture her prey. In Outland, Illidan, together with Kil'jaeden's Sunstrider, Lady Vash, and the Broken Akama, they're able to defeat the Pit Lord McFerrin, they claim the Black Temple and the title of Lord of Outland. Hiding from Kil'jaeden, though, would not be so easy.
What is this, Vash? Where did this storm come from?
Keep your head down, fool. Something terrible is drawing near.
Foolish little mongrel. You failed to destroy the Frozen Throne as I commanded. And still you thought to hide from me in this forsaken backwater. I thought you to be more cunning, Illidan.
In this very moment, Kil'jaeden invaded their minds, a moment Illidan had long dreaded and prepared for. He had schemes and plans in mind that the Deceiver could absolutely not find out about, so he braced himself as he felt Kil'jaeden probe his mind. Slowly, with expert care, he lowered the magical defenses of his mind, giving Kil'jaeden what he seemed to be looking for, while still guarding his most precious secrets. The moment seemed to last for hours, but only a few heartbeats had paused.
Kil'jaeden, I was merely set back. I was attempting to bolster my forces. The Lich King will be destroyed. I promise you.
Indeed. Still, these servitors you've gathered show some promise. I will give you one last chance, Illidan.
Had he done it? Had he deceived the Deceiver? Perhaps, but he was not the only one whose mind had been infiltrated, and it's very likely that in this moment, Kil'jaeden already made plans to ally himself with Kil'jaeden. Illidan considered telling them about the full scope of his plans, but he didn't know if he could trust them. Regardless, they remained at his side in his quest to once again try and destroy the Lich King, and once again he failed. It didn't matter much in the grand scheme of things. It would have been easier to keep Kil'jaeden on their good side, but Illidan was not discouraged, and he worked on doing what seemed to be impossible. His visions had shown him that stopping the Burning Legion could not happen if they just waited around for them to attack. They had to take the battle to the Legion itself, so all the things that we saw going down during the Burning Crusade, from Gruul the Dragon Slayer, yes, Gruul was apparently an ally of Illidan, Macfarraden and the Fel Orcs, Kil'jaeden within Tempest Keep, all the different forces that we faced within the Black Temple, all of that was just buying time while working on his true mission. And what a mission it was. Destroying the Legion is not a job for just one demon hunter, so more had to be trained. Kil'jaeden provided some of his blood elves, while others found a way to Illidan on their own. Vandel, for example, a night elf who lost his family to the Legion, he offered his services to Illidan. He wanted to learn how to slay those who slew his family, and even though the novel goes into much greater detail as to what it takes to become a demon hunter, it brilliantly describes it in gruesome details. I sadly don't have time to go through it all in such detail. Know this: obtaining a demon soul within you, fighting with the tools of the enemy, cutting yourself, containing the demon spirits, gaining magical tattoos, and facing the visions Illidan had seen, it is no easy task. There were many, and only a few survived the transformation, gouging out their own eyes as the horrible realization of the Legion's power was thrust upon them. They had to learn to see the world as Illidan did. They followed in the betrayer's shadow to do the seemingly impossible. Only a few survived, but those few were monsters when it came to fighting the Legion.
I've sacrificed everything. What have you given?
Meanwhile, Wardamayr Shadowsong was not sitting still. She went around trying to recruit allies in a war against Illidan. She was able to recruit some of the younger and more ambitious Draenei, but more often than not, she was rejected. Erechron at Talar, he knows that Illidan will one day turn his attention on them, but he wants to delay that moment as much as possible. The Naru Adal is focused on fighting the Legion, and at that point in time, Illidan was no threat to them, and he was also fighting the Legion, so the enemy of their enemy kind of situation. The Aldor did not have the strength to throw away assault in the Black Temple, and Maiev was too damn proud to accept the aid of the Blood Elves in the Scryers. Rejection all around. The only one willing to cooperate with her was the broken Akama. He realized that allying himself with Illidan had only replaced one evil lord of the Black Temple for another. The demon hunter had not given him the temple as he had promised, so Akama worked on betraying the betrayer. He and Maiev made schemes and plans. Akama told her to wait for the right moment, that Illidan was no easy prey. She listened, but unfortunately for both of them, Illidan was no fool. He didn't believe when Akama told him that the only reason he'd been meeting with Maiev was to present his lord with his greatest enemy on a platter. He didn't believe the broken, and he made sure that he would obey by ripping part of Akama's soul from his body and hold it hostage. The warden didn't know of this development, of course, so when Akama came to her and told her that her time for vengeance had come, she was more than eager to step into Illidan's trap. As he was working on his spell, a portal, a stepping stone in their mission against the Legion, Maiev and her troops attacked. Illidan's forces were more than ready for this moment, as portals opened up all around them and reinforcements arrived. They slaughtered the Night Elves that followed Maiev, the Draenei that followed Maiev, and even Akama's Broken that had joined Maiev in the assault. All of their souls were used to empower the spell work. Illidan made sure that the warden survived. After all, her captivity should be as enjoyable as his had been, but first they had a mission to complete. The portal they had created, it took them to Nafreza, the home of the Dreadlords, where Illidan was looking for information. The Dreadlords held a record of every triumph, conquest, plot, scheme, portal, and destroy worlds. All of that could be found on this planet. As the demon hunters exceeded even Illidan's expectations as they battled with the demons, his mission was to find the Seal of Argus. This disc was the key to the home world of Kil'jaeden and Archimonde, to a place where the Legion's commanders could finally be slain, the location of Argus. With his prize taken, Illidan decided to leave the Dreadlords with something to remember him by. He called to retreat for his forces, he urged them to go back through the portal, he spoke the words of unbinding, and as he did, the gate unraveled in a furious discharge of energy. All the backblast was directed into the Nafrezim's homeworld. If his calculations were correct, he had just shattered Nafreza, as Ner'zhul's magic had shattered Draenor. He had inflicted the greatest defeat that the Burning Legion had suffered in millennia, and Illidan was pleased. The next step in his plans was to use the disc and locate the planet. Ever since Sargeras had given Illidan these new magical eyes, he'd been able to see in the twisting nether, and he had perfected the arts in the years that he'd been imprisoned. Together with the demon hunters, he gathered some of the components that he needed for his spell, but the most unexpected development took place. The dark portal, the connection between Azeroth and Outland, was reopened, and Azeroth's forces, both Alliance and the Horde, they made the way to Outland. Illidan and his troops, they secretly assisted these forces from Azeroth by taking out High Lord Cruel and stopping a flanking demonic force from wiping them out. As Vandal observed his former brothers and sisters fight the Legion, he wondered what he would do if he was ordered to attack. He had joined Illidan to fight against the demonic forces of the Legion, not to fight his own kin, but they would see him as the enemy, as another demon. The truth of the matter was simple. He was loyal to Illidan and the Illidari, so if the order was given, he would attack. He would avoid them if he could, but he would not disobey Illidan. This is an explanation as to how the demon hunters join us in the Legion. They are not our enemy, even if we would think that they were.
Lord Illidan knows the way.
After helping out Azeroth's forces, Illidan makes his way to the throne of Kil'jaeden, where he used his magic like he had done to locate Nafreza, and his spirit left his physical body as he searched for Argus. The disc worked as a compass, and he had done the near impossible. He found the place where the Legion's commanders were vulnerable. He moved around to make sure that he had found the right place, and when he saw Kil'jaeden in a vast throne room, there was no doubt in his mind that he had found the right location. But Kil'jaeden's gaze, it fell upon him, and a twisted smile passed over the monstrous face. He was nearly busted, but an aura of immense power enwrapped him, pushing him out of the throne room while distracting Kil'jaeden. This thing was a thing of light, so bright as almost to be painful to behold. As Illidan became aware of it, he heard a titanic roar of rage from within the throne room, as if the Eredar Lord sensed it too. A voice entered his mind, telling him to be gone from this place. He could not survive here, not now, and his spirit was sent back to his body. He had survived, and he had found out what he needed to know, but he also found something unexpected, and he didn't trust it. Kil'jaeden was not known as the Deceiver for nothing, and despite it feeling like the light, perhaps it was all part of some sort of trap. No, it was much better to just trust in his own plan, so Illidan prepared for the next step, was to gather enough power for his portal directly into Argus. For this, he had to travel to Anduin and collect souls of the fallen Draenei inside. The broken Akama heard of this news, he heard of the plans of Illidan, and he was not happy about it. The Lord of Outland was going to desecrate a holy burial ground of his people, so despite having part of his soul ripped from his body, the broken still had some fighting spirit left. He made his way to the prison where they held Maiev captive with similar spells that they had used on Illidan. Self-inflicted wounds were healed, and the guards, they had inflicted petty torments. They had spat on her, they had poked her with sharp sticks, they had given her food in which the Ashtonga urinated, but Illidan himself, he had been so busy with it all that any real form of torment by his hands never took place. Akama informs Maiev about Illidan's plans, that together they could bring the betrayer down. The warden, in truth, she doesn't want anything to do with Akama, not after he betrayed her, but she also didn't have much choice in her current situation. He told her to be ready, that her path to vengeance would soon be open.
I have been waiting, and when the time is right, the betrayer will become the betrayed.
Within Anduin, Illidan and his fel orcs, they worked on filling up a soul siphon with the souls of the fallen Draenei, as well as the souls of the orcs that fell while trying to defend Illidan. Their leader had chosen not to bring his demon hunters to save their strength for the final confrontation, but this would prove to be a miscalculation. The necromancers and the forces summoned within Anduin, they proved to be a very powerful enemy. One by one, the fel orcs went down, and Illidan had to give it all he had to both maintain his magic and fill the siphon, as well as guard himself from the attacks. Even parts of his own spirit were sucked into the siphon. Hold on, he told himself, as finally the final gem lit up and he got himself the hell out of there. One miscalculation, and even weeks later, he still felt weak. His power not even close to anything that it was before he entered the crypts. All around him, the kingdom of the Lord of Outland crumbled, as the Azerothian forces, they not only focused their attention on the demons, but on him as well. Gruul, Lady Vash, McFerridon, Kil'jaeden, all of them were brought low, and their attention was drawn to the Black Temple. Illidan was tired. It all didn't matter in the grand scheme of things, and he needed to work on his bigger plan. Strike at the heart of the Legion at Argus. He needed more time, he needed to prepare his spells and portals, yet time was the one thing that they didn't have, as our forces assaulted the temple. The Lord of Outland told them all to trust in the defenses of the Black Temple and fight, as he worked on creating anchors to Argus to link his portal. As he once again left his physical body and traveled through the twisting nether, he feared that he might be detected, but against all odds he completed his work and the link between Outland and Argus was made. The portal could be activated once the pattern was finished. He had but a heartbeat to enjoy his victory, and then the attack came. An astonishing power grabbed his spirit, but it was not an evil source that grabbed him. It was an Elder Naru, a being of holy light and possibly the eldest remaining in these universes. This was the being that had saved him earlier, and Illidan asked him why he was serving Kil'jaeden, what he was doing here. The Elder Naru informed him that he did quite the opposite. As all Naru do, he worked against the Legion, and he had waited for Illidan, for the universe to throw up a champion in the face of those who would destroy it. It could have perhaps have picked a better one. The words emerged from his mouth before he could stop them. I do not think so. You are what you are. All your days have forged you into that. A weapon aimed at the heart of a great demon. I would like to think I'm somewhat more sentient than my warglaves. That is what makes you dangerous. So the universe has anointed me to slay Kil'jaeden. His tone was sardonic, but hope flickered inside Illidan. Perhaps, if what this Naru said was true, there was some chance of victory after all. The swirl of lights indicated a negative. No. Your enemy is far greater than Kil'jaeden, greater even than Sargeras and his burning legion. Wonderful, Illidan said, as if they were not strong enough. The suspicion that this was all a subtle, mocking trap set by Kil'jaeden settled once more into his mind. If this was a trap, his struggle was ended. If it was not, then things were even worse than he had thought. The Void is a more potent foe by far than the Burning Legion. It is the ultimate opponent of light. It will take all the peoples of Azeroth and Outland united to oppose it. Before Illidan could defend himself in any way, a bolt of pure light blasted from the Naru. It struck his empty eye sockets and filled them with a golden glow. Illidan braced himself for a blast of agony that did not come. His vision shimmered and faded, and he found himself looking down on a terrible battlefield. Amid mountains of corpses, a winged figure battled at the head of the legions of light. A golden glow surrounded his warglaves. He cleft demons asunder with mighty blows. The soldiers surrounding him gazed up in awe and wonder at their leader. It took Illidan a moment to realize that this being's features were his own, transformed, his eyes glowing fiercely. As Illidan watched, the winged figure rose above the battle, defying gigantic entities of darkness, creations of the evil of the Void. A halo played around his head. His body began to glow brighter than the sun, and from his outstretched hands, rays of light emerged to strike down his foes. You will defy death, the Naru voice said as the vision faded. I have seen this. Whatever you were, whatever you are, a champion of light is what you will be. You will be a hero, said the Naru, but there will be a price. There always is. The Naru then sends Illidan back to his body, where he wonders to himself if this could possibly be true. Was there really a path to redemption for him? He had never dared to think such a thing was possible. And yet, the Naru believed it would be so. It believed in him, and just for a moment, he let himself believe it too. We'll come back to the vision at the end of the video. Let's first wrap up the story. As this is going down, we assault the Black Temple together with Akama, Maiev, the Naru, pretty much anything that we have to throw at them. Illidan realizes that time is up, but perhaps he can still use the Soul Siphon for a whole different plan. He summons his demon hunters, including Vandel, but Vandel ends up in a fight with Maiev, which she wins and she knocks him out, and then she makes her way to Illidan. The Betrayer sends his demon hunters to the planet of Mardum. Akama knocks on his door, we take him out, and Maiev lands the killing blow. The Betrayer seems to be dead, but Vandel wakes up fearing that he was the last of them, that Illidan's great war was finished before it even began. Despair swept over him until he heard Illidan's familiar voice. A whisper so faint that it might have come from the far edge of the universe, or the other side of death, or from the deepest recess of his memory.
You are not prepared.
You must be prepared. And that's the end of the novel, leading into the expansion Legion. Now I'm going to talk about some of the implications and possibilities from the novel, but in order to do this properly, I'll have to talk about spoilers for Legion, as well as spoilers for Legacy of the Void. If you don't want spoilers for any of these games, then just know that you're informed about the novel, and let me just say thank you very much for watching so far. Now, to cover all the bases and give as much information as possible, I asked you guys and girls on Twitter and Facebook for questions or topics that you want me to talk about. Does he get together with Maiev at all? As much as I like to ship Illidan and Maiev for fun, there's no clear sign of them feeling any sort of love or getting together. There are a couple of lines explaining that Maiev has become very much like Illidan over the years. Akama mentions that he understands why Illidan fears her since he's so very similar to him, and Ericon in Talar, he makes the mistake of saying that the line went as followed: "The Naru came to Warcraft City recently. It seems to me that you might make common cause with them. They are no friends to your Illidan." To which Maiev then said, "He is not my Illidan. The Huntress is nothing without the hunt, and I'm not giving up on the ship, I'll go down with it." But I think that this is more to indicate that Maiev looks very similar to Illidan. This is also reflected in the novel Wolfheart. Basically, over the years, as she hunted her prey, as she guarded her prey, she has become very much the thing that she hated. Will Legion reflect that properly? I sure hope so, but time will tell. Is there any clarification on who sent the Blood Elven forces to Warcraft City and why? It doesn't go into full details, but it does hint at Kil'jaeden switching sides the moment that Kil'jaeden shows up and scans their minds. Who knows what went on between the Deceiver and the Blood Elf Prince in that very moment, but it was reason enough for Illidan not to trust him with the full scope of his plans. Adol refuses to aid Maiev when she first shows up asking for support, since at that point in time, Illidan was still considered an ally against the Legion. The Blood Elf forces, they were sent to attack Adol and Warcraft City. This turned Illidan into an enemy, because they assumed that Kil'jaeden and Illidan were still buddy-buddy, and it was an order of Illidan that they attacked. If the moment that Kil'jaeden showed up truly was the turning point for Kil'jaeden, then it would make perfect sense to attack and turn Adol against Illidan, a powerful force against the Legion. Remember that it was also the Legion, or specifically Doomlord Kasich, that reopened the Dark Portal and allowed Azeroth to step through. Plans upon plans, schemes within schemes. By taking out Illidan, we took out a very powerful player against the Legion. And then finally, it's the elephant in the room, the Elder Naru's vision of Illidan, a champion of the light, leading an army against the darkness of the universe, darkness called the Void. When this was leaked, a lot of people had different opinions about this development, and I can't offer much more than just my opinion. From the information on the alpha and data mine information, we can tell that the Legion steals Illidan's body from the Vault of the Wardens, which had been imprisoned by Maiev after his fall at the top of the Black Temple. They then take it to Blackrook Hold, they separate Illidan's spirit from his body for some unexplained reason, and then data mine information suggests that we'll see either the pure demonic form of Illidan or perhaps some entity using his body. I wonder if we're going to cleanse Illidan from his demonic side, and although it could make it easier for the light to empower him if we do that, it will kind of take away the whole demonic part out of the Demon Hunter. It's very hard to predict the future, but it seems like Illidan himself will make a return. He's going to strike out of Gul'dan, and then he'll lead his Illidari further into their mission against the Legion, and possibly, maybe as a holy angel against the Void. Now, when you think of Illidan, right, before hearing this story, did you ever imagine him as a champion of the light? I think that's my major problem here. Not so much that they're empowering him, because I already had a feeling that he was going to get a power boost. If you remember way back when, I think it was during November, I was working on the Legion script, right? And it seemed to me like the pillars of creation that we're going to collect in Legion, these could have been used to empower Illidan. I even asked you guys and girls on Twitter to send me some photoshops of this, which was very handy for the video, but to see the light empower him, a Naru? I mean, it seems very similar to Anduin's vision leading the Army of Light, but in Anduin's case, it makes a lot of sense. Anduin has always been about the light. Illidan was not pure evil in my opinion. He did try to fight against the Legion. He always walked on the dark side. He used the powers of the enemy against them. So in my opinion, having Illidan fly around as some sort of angel of light, it makes as much sense as the undead wielder the light or a holy dreadlord, for example. I get that they want to give Illidan a redemption storyline. This has been clear from the moment that it was requested at BlizzCon. I think it was like 2011. Chris Metzen already said that he's a sucker for redemption stories, but I think making him this warrior of light, even without context, just the pure basis of it, it takes it a little bit too far. I personally preferred if they would stick with the newly built-up storyline, as in he was working towards against the Legion during the Burning Crusade, and we screwed over those plans because we were pitched against Illidan. That is a good enough redemption in my opinion. He then comes back, he teams up with the Demon Hunters, they help us out against Kil'jaeden, we travel to Argus, we strike at the heart of the Legion, and perhaps Illidan is going to sacrifice himself against Kil'jaeden, or maybe Sargeras is going to show up that would require him to sacrifice himself, and there you have a redemption story. I personally feel like going the light route is a little bit too much. A lot of you also asked me if the StarCraft 2 universe is set on the same stage as the Warcraft universe, because the storylines are very, very similar. You have a character, somewhat evil, somewhat on the darker side, empowered to a holy being, and then used to strike down the evil darkness of the universe. It has become so very similar in the way that they present the story, in the way that the story is going, that people are actually wondering, like, are these the same universes? Because it all just seems so very similar. I still personally believe it's not the same universe. I just think that they are not that creative with their story development. But who knows? You know, in the end, I've been struggling with forming a proper opinion about this, because nothing is set in stone as of yet. It's just a vision. A very similar vision as we've seen with Anduin Rin. And that said, I really hope that we will never see Illidan fly above the forces, leading them as a champion of light with angel wings and shooting beams. But who knows, you might have a completely different opinion about that. Perhaps you always envisioned Illidan as this champion of light, flying around as an angel. Let me know in the comments below, because what I've seen from forum topics and what I've seen from everybody is that there are so many opinions about this. By all means, share them in the comments down below. Like I said, I can only offer you my view on things right now, and who knows where the story might take us. I am going to wrap up the video though, since I've been going on for long enough. But by all means, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Hello everyone! War Crimes is the new novel written by Christie Golden, and it tells the story of Garrosh and his trial in Pandaria. At the end of the siege, Thrawn nearly took off his head, but Varian stopped him and Taranzu told him that a trial would decide his fate. Keep in mind that this video will contain spoilers, and I'll never be able to retell the story as well as it was written. That's why I advise you to get this book, because it's brilliant, and in my opinion one of the better books to start reading the novels with. It contains scenes from nearly 8 different novels, but it explains the scenes so well that it stands on its own. It connects the dots of all that happened with Garrosh, with Fedamore, with Pandaria, and it even goes beyond that, going into Warlords of Draenor. So once again, get this book. With that out of the way, let the trial of the century begin. All the leaders of the Horde and Alliance are invited to witness his trial at the Temple of the White Tiger. Naturally, to keep things under control, one of the rules is they can't carry any weapons, and a field around the temple will prevent anyone from casting spells. At this point, everyone wants to see blood. They want to see Garrosh pay for what he's done. They want to see his head on a spike. To give him a fair trial, the August Celestials themselves are the jury, Taranzu is the judge, and someone will have to defend Garrosh, while another will have to be the accuser and make it clear that Garrosh should die. The Horde picks Bane to defend Garrosh, and as you might imagine, this is an impossible task for anyone, let alone Bane. His father was killed by Garrosh, and now they're looking at him to defend his killer. But if anyone can make people listen, it's Bane, especially because of that history. The Alliance has no problem with Bane being the defender. They were offered to use a veto if they didn't agree with the choice, but they didn't. As an accuser, the Alliance offered Varian Rin, and the Horde would have none of that. Varian and the Horde have a long history of being enemies. Some still don't trust the changes he went through, so they used their right to veto. They could only do this once though, and this is exactly what the Alliance planned on, since their second choice was Tyrande Whisperwind. Someone who had even less love for Garrosh, for the Horde as a whole, just in case some Horde members still had some sort of affection or doubts towards Garrosh. We as an outside viewer already know that the Horde despises Garrosh, at least as much as the Alliance does. But they don't know that about each other, so the choice was made. Tyrande versus Bane. Tyrande as a priest saw it as her job as bringing enlightenment and understanding. Condemning Garrosh appropriately would eventually bring healing. She didn't see it as a task of hatred, not one about ending life, just one about bringing the facts and letting justice take its course. Bane, as you might imagine, had a bit more trouble with accepting his role as defender. He held a ritual to communicate with his father and find clarity to do the right thing. This was a really emotional scene in the book, and his father asked him one simple question. Answer this, and you will know what to do. If it grieves you that I was slain by treachery, can you then do anything but strive for perfect truth and integrity, even, perhaps especially, when it does not come easily? Can you not do your utmost to honor this role that has been given to you? Truth be told, Bane already knew deep down in his heart what the honorable choice was, and he just had to have this confirmation. As his father bestowed this wisdom on him, he had to leave Bane again because Cairn is no longer amongst the living, and Bane had so many more questions for his father, tears down his face, but his father just couldn't stay. Now, it wouldn't be a trial on Azeroth if there wasn't a little twist, and to help each make their case and to not just rely on witness testimonies, the Bronze Dragonflight offers to show visions from the past. Kairos Dormu has tinkered with his vision of time, the one that we actually helped him create, and he's now able to control it in such a way that he can decide which moments to show. Kairos is helping Bane with this, while Chromie is helping Tyrande, and both of them are offered their knowledge and wisdom of the time waves to show specific moments and build their case around it. When they drag Garrosh to court, Tanazu reads to him the long list of crimes that they're charging him with. You are charged for all acts committed in your name or by those with whom you've allied. Genocide, murder, forcible transfer of population, enforced disappearance of individuals, enslavement, the abduction of children, torture, the killing of prisoners, forced pregnancy, and the wanton destruction of cities, towns and villages not justified by military or civilian necessity. What say you to these charges, Garrosh Hellscream? Garrosh smiled, beginning to slowly applaud, although the chains about his wrist hampered the gesture. The show has barely commenced, he responded, sneering, and already I give it a standing ovation. This promises to be more entertaining than the Dark Moon Fair. I will not say that I am guilty, for that denotes shame, nor will I protest innocence, for I claim no such. Let the comedy begin. This of course creates a massive burst of outrage, and they had to remove several out of the courthouse to restore order. Garrosh sees this as entertainment, a joke of a trial since the outcome is almost certain. Now I'm not going to cover each individual witness that they summon, that would simply take too much time. I got the general impression from the trial like I was reading a Horde versus Alliance discussion on the forums. The Horde did this, the Alliance did that, Dalaran, Faramore, Vol'jin, Varian, all those discussions that have been had, but there was one testimony that surprised me, but was also really beautiful. One of the crimes that they're charging Garrosh with is forced pregnancy, and the first time that I heard this, I was like, what? The only case that I can remember is with Alexstrasza during the first Horde invasion. This happened before Garrosh ever set foot on Azeroth, but since he allied himself with the Dragonmaw clan, and they were responsible for this, they're charging Garrosh with this crime. They even enslaved proto-drakes during his ruling, so the blame falls on his shoulders. For this, Alexstrasza the Lifebinder herself takes the stand, and she tells the heart-wrenching story as to how the orcs forced her to lay more eggs and breed dragons that they will use against the Alliance. How they picked up one of her children, the children of the Lifebinder, destroyed the egg in front of her eyes, and smeared her face with the remains. Bane keeps his questions short, and he asked Alexstrasza how she currently feels about the orcs that imprisoned her and did these terrible things. I have no quarrel with any race on Azeroth, she replied. I am the Lifebinder, and even though most of my powers as aspect have disappeared, my heart is still the same. I love them. Bane says what everybody's thinking. You love them? These orcs that did such terrible things to you? Few beings are truly evil, and even they are not necessarily beyond redemption. Change is inherent in life. As long as something lives, it can grow. It can seek the light or the darkness. It is only when it chooses the darkness so completely that life itself is endangered that I would say there is no hope. Bane then asks if the same orcs who did this to her would ask for forgiveness, what would she do? And Alexstrasza looks directly at Thrall with a big smile and says that she would forgive them, of course. Such is the beauty of the Lifebinder and this theme of growing, of change, of choices. This is what the story truly is about. Not just for Garrosh, but for all of them who have changed throughout the years. Varian has changed, Thrall has changed, Jaina has changed, Moira, Anduin. All these characters have changed over the years. They've grown, they've made choices, and taking someone's life removes any possibility for that change. Besides the trial itself, there are a couple of side stories going on. First we have the long-awaited reunion of the Windrunner sisters. Verissa Windrunner lost her husband Ronan during the bombing of Faramore, and Sylvanas never had any love for Garrosh. They both fear that this trial could somehow end up with Garrosh keeping his head, so Verissa sends her sister a message together with the necklace given to them by their oldest sister. They meet up and they come up with a plan to make certain that Garrosh does not survive this trial. They plan to poison his food, but besides that, they also grow closer again. Sylvanas is able to feel things that she hasn't felt in years, and for once she acknowledges how lonely she's been. Verisa tells Sylvanas that after the deed is done, she wants to join her in the Undercity, that she has nothing left to live for, and that the world of darkness, Sylvanas' world, is much more appealing now. Sylvanas is cautious at first about this new relation. She wants to know why her sister has changed so much, and Verisa breaks down not in anger, not in fear, not in hatred. She breaks down in tears with the simple line, "He took my Ronin." Sylvanas holds her sister close as her grief and pain simply pours out of her, and they make their plans to assassinate Garrosh. Warlord Zayla, another side story, managed to survive the siege of Orgrimmar, and she, together with the remainder of the Dragonmark clan, moved to Grim Batol, the same location where they once upon a time held Queen Alexstrasza. She's still extremely loyal to Garrosh, and she received a message from her friend that she should gather more allies and get ready to break Garrosh out of prison. First she recruits the sharpshooter Shokia, the same female orc that was part of the Horde team on Pandaria. Next they collect the mage Talon Songweaver, who's the same blood elf to betray Jaina at Theramore, and the Horde players rescued him during the Theramore destroyed scenario. The final name for the crew is the Goblin Hedomiser, who's been held captive by the Alliance at Westguard Keep. They need him for his Zeppelin, and at the same time they recruit a bunch of pirates so they have enough forces to storm the Temple of the White Tiger. There are more side stories going on, but the final one that really captured me was the one between Anduin and Garrosh. Bane tried to convince Garrosh to open his mouth and say something during the trial so he could use him as a witness and possibly strengthen his case. Garrosh kept his mouth shut though and only agreed to talk to one single person. Prince Anduin Rin. Anduin didn't immediately say yes. The memory of getting crushed by Garrosh and the Divine Bell was still fresh in his memory, and even though they healed him, his bones still ache from time to time. Despite that, he decides to go through with it because someone in trouble has asked to speak with him. How could he say no and still stand in the light? He saw it as his duty as a priest, and he simply couldn't deny such a request. During one of the conversations, they talked about someone's nature. Garrosh asked Anduin if the light chose him or if Anduin chose the light, and could he choose to deny the light. Anduin asked why he would possibly want to do that, to which Garrosh said that once upon a time, a golden-haired, beloved human prince also turned his back on the light. Outraged, Anduin said, "I'm not Arthas." Garrosh smiled oddly and said, "No, you are not. But maybe I am." Can one turn away from his true nature? Can he change? And is there such a thing as a set-in-stone destiny? This is what this conversation comes down to. Once again, that returning theme of change, and somehow, someway, throughout the story, I started to believe that Garrosh could change if given the chance. Near the end of the trial, Tyrande and Bane are both given the opportunity to make their final statement. Tyrande brought with her 9 different stones, each collected from a location where Garrosh did terrible things, all the things he was being charged with. For example, 1 stone came from Theramore, 1 stone came from Ashenvale, another from Azara, and 1 taken from the arena of Orgrimmar. Tiny little drops of blood on it, the location where Garrosh killed Cairn. With each stone, Tyrande relived the story behind it, and she told the jury that Garrosh will never change. All there is to him is greed and plotting and pride. As long as he breathes, he will butcher. End him now. Bane stepped up and he took the rock taken from Orgrimmar and he pulverized it into dust, claiming that this trial, these stones, Tyrande's presentation, all of it didn't matter. In the end, we all turned to dust, just like this rock. But what does matter is what we choose to do with our time. People change, we've seen this time and time again, and the only justice would not be to end the possibility of change, it would be to give life a chance, even someone like Garrosh Hellscream. With those final statements, the Celestials decided to end court and later speak their verdict. Meanwhile, Verisa poisoned the food that would be Garrosh's last meal, but on her way back she ran into Anduin, who was about to talk to Garrosh. Anduin reminded her of her sons, and the memory of her 2 boys melted a little bit of the ice surrounding her heart. She saw running into Anduin as a sign from the light, and she told him that the food was poisoned and the choice was in his hands. Let Garrosh die, or warn him before he eats. This news reached Sylvanas, while Verisa spent time with her kids, and Sylvanas was devastated. She finally allowed herself to feel again for her sister, had opened up her heart, and envisioned a future where she wouldn't be that lonely, and all of that was taken away from her. She raced through the land, killing anything in sight, screaming her Banshee scream, and she let it all out. Sylvanas Windrunner, Banshee Queen, was so close to changing, but now the door is shut. Her heart is cold again, and for those who wondered what would happen during a Windrunner reunion, now we know. Sylvanas let her sister in, but her sister let her down, and now I can't imagine anything in the world possible of pushing Sylvanas away from her cold and dark path. If there was ever any hope that her older sister would change Sylvanas, I think that's now destroyed. Now by giving Anduin this information, Garrosh's fate is now in Anduin's hands. In the final conversation, Garrosh was really agitated since he was facing his own execution. He was trying to get Anduin mad, push him off that holy and righteous pedestal that all the arrogant Alliance members tried to pretend they're on. And he takes it so far that he says, "You listen to me, boy. I hope you live to be king. Because whether or not I'm here to see it, the day you take the throne, the orcs will celebrate. And we will come for Stormwind, do you hear me? We will race through your streets and kill your people. We will place your soft little peace-craving body on a pike and burn your city down around your still wet ears. And in whatever afterlife your precious light grants you, your parents will wish Queen Tiffin had miscarried." This infuriated Anduin, and he wanted nothing more than to use the light and end Garrosh. But when his food was carried in, Anduin made the only decision he could. He reached for the plate, smacked it on the floor, and Garrosh grabbed his arm. He twisted it and caused agonizing pain, but the holy light filled Anduin, and he told Garrosh that the food was poisoned. A rat, the only companion in that cage, took a bite from the food, and he died in front of their eyes. Garrosh let Anduin go, and Anduin stepped away. He had made his peace with Garrosh, and now Garrosh would have to make peace with himself. As a final request, Anduin asked the guards if they could remove the shackles around Garrosh's legs, so he could at least face his verdict as the warrior that he was. This would turn out to be a huge mistake. Garrosh is given the opportunity to say his final words before they speak his verdict. He speaks about how Tyrande made a strong case against him, how Bane, despite his own feelings, tried not to plead his innocence, but make people listen and understand. Finally, he speaks to Anduin, who should have every reason to want to see Garrosh dead, but instead he talked about the light and about how he believes people could change. He took a deep breath and seemed to be gathering his thoughts. Anduin leaned forward, not wanting to hope, but hoping wildly, beautifully anyways. And now, here at this moment, when I am free to speak my mind and heart, I tell you true, I regret. His laughter rang through the arena. Nothing! I would destroy 1,000 Feramours if it would bring the Alliance to his knees. I would hunt down every night elf whelp that beats on the face of this world and silence their mewling forever. I would banish every troll, every tauren, every simpering blood elf and greedy goblin and shambling walking corpse if it were within my power. And it almost was. Garrosh has no regrets, and while he's making this speech, some notice that Chromie is nowhere to be found, while Kairos Dormu is tinkering with the vision of time. Anduin moves to the prison area to ask the guard if they'd seen Chromie, and there Refion's betrayal becomes clear. He, together with his henchmen, had knocked out the guards, locked Chromie away, and he explained to Anduin that this was all for the greater good of Azeroth. One day, Anduin might understand, and on that day, they would face a terrible enemy, perhaps even as brothers. Refion then knocks Anduin out, while in the courtroom Kairos Dormu uses his device to create a portal for both him and Garrosh to escape, while copies from our heroes from different time waves show up to fight. Don't forget about Zayla and her Dragonflight. They show up just at the right time with their pirates, the Dragonmaw, dragons from the Infinite Dragonflight, Talon Songweaver is dropping miniature mana bombs all over the place. In short, all hell broke loose. The field that prevented them from casting magic is disturbed by the Infinite Dragonflight, and a small war erupts around the temple. Bane faces off against the Bane that decided to end Garrosh after he killed his father. Kalik faces off against the Kalik that was unable to stop Jaina from flooding Orgrimmar, and this caused a war that eradicated all of the blue Dragonflights. Goel had to fight a thrall who never escaped Durnhold, and Anduin saw a copy of himself that lost his father and was forced to be the king. Refion had once said that he feared that Anduin was too soft to lead his kingdom, and this Anduin cowered in fear with all the fighting around him. Our Anduin grabbed Fearbreaker from the other Anduin, and he used it to fight off a fake Vol'jin. Vol'jin was about to kill him, but the other Anduin jumped up and took the blade instead. At that moment, Chromie showed up and she tossed the fake Vol'jin away, but it was too late for the other Anduin. Chromie couldn't stick around though, since she had to do everything in her power to stabilize the rifts created by Kairos. She did tell Anduin that he had to accept his other form in order to make his grip on our reality falter. It was easy for Anduin to do this, but the others were facing against crazy copies of themselves. Copies that showed that the choices we make define who we are, that everyone could turn into a Garrosh or could become the exact opposite. Our heroes have gone through a lifetime of changes with choices along the path, and now they had to accept these counterparts for what they were. Bane, while he was fighting, noticed that the Celestials, they just sat there, they did nothing, and this angered him. At that moment, the White Tiger shouted out, "Remember the Shah. The more you try to fight it, the stronger it becomes." Their wisdom flowed into Bane and the others, and they realized what they had to do. One by one, they started to accept the wisdom of the Celestials. They talked to their counterparts, and they dealt with them. They dealt with the possibility that they too could have fallen as far as Garrosh had fallen. These counterparts were not the only enemy though, since Warlord Zayla was still around to make sure that Garrosh had made his escape, and she fought with Varian. A fireball shot by Jaina quickly ended their fight, but in response Jaina was shot by Shokia. His blood spilled out of Jaina's body, and Varian could have gone after Zayla and end her once and for all, but naturally he decided to go for Jaina. This gave Zayla the chance to check out the temple, and she saw that Garrosh had made a clean escape. She called her Dragamod, told them to retreat, and she left the pirates to their fate. Varian, wounded and hurt, carried Jaina to Goel. And when Goel saw her limp body, his eyes went big. He, together with Draka, Anduin, Tronda, Velen, they all tried to heal Jaina's wounds, but all hope seemed to be lost. Varian told Anduin to come away, since there's nothing left that he could do, but Anduin couldn't give up hope.
Hope is eternal. We must never give in to despair.
And so the student remembers the lessons of my temple. Hope is what you have when all other things have failed you. Where there is hope, you make room for healing, for all things that are possible, and some that are not. The Red Crane of Hope used his powers to heal all of them, and Jaina's body was made whole. With the battle done and the knowledge that Garrosh had escaped, they still asked the Celestials what their verdict would have been. The Celestials told them that they already knew the answer from the very start. They would have given Garrosh life. So why this trial in the first place? Because not only Garrosh was on trial, all of them were judged and sentenced, since all of them had to understand. This entire story was to heal old wounds, bring understanding, and acknowledge the events that happened. We as an outsider, we know all these events, but these characters didn't, and they had to make choices. Jaina, for example, chose to let go of her hatred. Verissa chose to embrace the future with her kids. And when they were fighting their copies, they all had to embrace the wisdom of the Celestials and understand that all of them had a potential Garrosh inside. That was the meaning behind this trial, which allowed them to go into the world with a cleansed soul, with wisdom, and do what they must. Even though Goel had long ago stepped away from a position of power, all faces eventually turned towards him. Humbly, Goel, son of Durotan and Draka, spoke for them all. We will find Garrosh. And so ends War Crimes, and all of this leads us into the next expansion, Warlords of Draenor. Like I speculated in my time travel videos, it was Kairos Dormu together with Rephion that set these events in motion. The true question still remains, why give Garrosh this golden ticket? In game and from this book, we learned that certain members of the Bronze Dragonflight, they're not happy about losing their powers, and they would rather manipulate events to return to their former glory. This is Kairos Dormu's motivation, which could very well lead into the creation of the Infinite Dragonflight. But what's Rephion's motivation? We know that his one goal is to protect and save Azeroth. He even told Anduin about this, but what's the gain from creating this Iron Horde? Does he expect the Iron Horde to conquer our planet and be a stronger defense? I highly doubt it, since he tells Anduin that he hopes to stand together with him against this foe. So does he perhaps want to add more Orcish and Draenei troops to the Alliance and the Horde? Or is there more manipulation going on? Remember that Kairos Dormu and some of the Bronze Dragonflight, they can see the possibilities of the time waves, they can browse it, they have knowledge. Is Rephion trying to mold a certain future, or is he doing something else?
What if it were possible to shape and mold time as you would a ball of clay? What possibilities await? What new worlds could we create?
Time will tell what the next expansion might bring, and I can't wait to find out. Before I end this video, I want to give a couple of lore bits that didn't flow into my story, but they are interesting to know. Agra is pregnant with her second child, just as we've seen in the water vision during the Cataclysm. This was a nice touch in my opinion. It's nice that this prophecy is fulfilled, and having her pregnant makes the decision of leaving her behind during Warlords a bit more understandable, at least in my opinion. Just like the dragons, all the Celestials have the ability to change their shape and form. We already seen this with the Jade Serpent turning into young Pandaren cub, but this time they had the tiger in human form, the red crane as a blood elf, and Yao Zhao as a tauren. G Firepaw and Isa Cloudsinger are currently enjoying their time together with their relation. They're still representatives for the Horde and Alliance. It doesn't look like G has actually left the Horde after the events of the siege, so time will tell where that relation might go. Some of the Kor'kron that serves Garrosh left his service after the events of the novel Wolfheart. During that book, Garrosh had captured a couple of Magnetar from Northrend and he held them under control by threatening their children. Despite these massive troops, they still lost the war because Varian embraced his wolf side and the Worgen joined the Alliance forces. Garrosh had promised the parents that he would release their children if they fought for him, and he held his words, only he released the children not in Northrend, but in Azshara. Azshara has hostile Naga, and these children they had no way of defending themselves, and this act was such an act of cruelty and dishonor that several of the Kor'kron left his service. There was a small line about Jaina that she's been negotiating with Lor'themar, and I hope that this was about the imprisoned Sun Reavers in Dalaran. They didn't go into details, but Vol'jin did send Jaina notes stating that he doesn't hold Dalaran against her. The ghost of Garrosh has done enough damage, and Vol'jin won't hold a grudge. This note pushed Jaina into letting go of her hatred, and brought her and Kayla closer together, so my speculation is that either the Sun Reavers are already released, or they're going to be released. If you want to know more details about the Jaina Kayla story and more details in general, get this book. I simply can't explain all the little details in a single video, but I do hope that you've got a better understanding of the story and how we're going to go into the next expansion. I truly loved reading this book. There are always a couple of things that are not that great, like the whole concept of a trial or Dalaran, not going into details about that, but overall, this book in my opinion is great. That's just my opinion though, so do with it what you want. For now, I'm going to end this video since I've been going on for long enough. Hello everyone! And most of you know by now, the second Warcraft Chronicle is out, and it gives a lot of details about the origin of Draenor, the evolution that took place there, leading into the formation of the Horde and the first and second war on Azeroth. In this video, I want to talk about the major origin story, the platform for which the other stories take place, and next week we'll talk about the changes to the formation of the Horde storyline and some things that stood out for me. Now I won't be going into every single detail that the Chronicles offers, like I've done with Volume 1, that's just incorporated into future lore videos, but some things are pretty damn awesome to talk about and I do want to share it, so let's begin at the very beginning. As light and void clashed together, the physical universe came to be. Some planets had a Titan spirit inside of them, which the other Titans were looking for, but some of them did not. And the planet that we now call Draenor, also called Dargar by the Mighty Ogres or Rakshar by the Arakoa, that planet came to be without a Titan spirit inside. The old gods also did not touch this planet, but it was home to the elements, fire, earth, water and air, and even the fifth element was in abundance, the spirit of life, which saturated the planet. This tempered the violent nature of the other elements and prevented them from taking on physical forms. It also accelerated the growth of flora and fauna, making the world a very savage place where the strong preyed on the weak and the cunning preyed on the strong. Draenor's greatest predators did not hunt with fang or claw, they hunted with root and thorn. A strain of plant had sprouted on Draenor, which was called spore mounds. Nature simply took over the planet, and their roots dug so deep in search of water that they actually tapped into the element of life that suffused Draenor's stones and soil. They consumed this primordial energy, which gave them sentience and allowed them to act as a single massive organism. The spore mounds and all other vegetations, they became known collectively as the Evergrowth, and with their hive mind they could work in unison. If left unchecked, they would eventually take over and devour everything on the planet of Draenor, including the elemental spirits. But luckily for the planet, the Titan Agramar was hunting for demons in this area, and his journey took him near Draenor, where he witnessed the Evergrowth. Despite the planet not having a slumbering soul inside, it still intrigued the Titan, and he could not leave Draenor to its fate. Similar to when they brought order to Azeroth and battled with the old gods, Agramar also realized that if he himself would step in, then he'd probably do some massive damage to the planet or even destroy it, so instead he created a servant in his image. The goal was not to exterminate Draenor's plant life, but to temper it and give the planet a chance. Fire, air, earth and water, they were woven into a massive elemental storm. The roaring tempest was channeled into Draenor's largest mountain, which which groaned to life and stood up on two colossal legs. This massive being was named Grond, and as he set out to conquer the Evergrove, lakes of elemental fire trailed in his footsteps. He dredged out seas, he carved valleys and forged mountains to separate the Evergrove, and he stabbed a spore mound, tearing it from the world's surface. The other spore mounds, they shivered in agony at the destruction of their kin, and they soon realized that they needed a new weapon to fight back, so they drained the surrounding forest and jungles of their life essence, leaving behind only withered tracts of land. Infused with these energies, the spore mounds arose to walk the world themselves, 3 in total, each embodying a different region of the Evergrove's domain. There was Zang, swampy mires and mushroom thickets glistening across its heights. There was Botan, covered in primal forest lands, and then there was Nanu, which wore a fleece of dense jungles. As one, the spore mounds moved against Grond, and Draenor buckled under the weight of the warring giants. Like his creator, Grond had an iron will, and the battle was fierce. Zang was the first to fall, and in the ages to come, the rotting body that remained behind, that would transform into a fungal region known as Zanger Sea, and with Draenor being corrupted, it was eventually known as the Zanger Marsh. Nanu was the second to fall, and its broken husk would slowly sink into the earth, and that became a region called Tanan Jungle, eventually known as Hellfire Peninsula. Botan was the last standing, and it sensed its enemy's weakened state, but it needed more power to finish the job, so it started to leech the dwindling life essence from both Nanu and Zang. This gave it enough power to cover Grond in thousands of small vines, burrowing into the cracks and wounds on his skin, and wrenching them open, causing new fissures to erupt across his body. The elemental giant collapsed beneath its own weight, and it crumbled into pieces. The bulk of his corpse that would form a mountain range at the edge of a region later known as Nagrand. Now this colossal battle, it had a major impact on life for Draenor, since bits and pieces from both the spore mounds and Grond, they turned into whole new creatures. The strongest for the spore mounds, they were giants called the Janissar, while the colossals, they formed from the rocks that came from Grond. Much of the stony debris that fell from Grond, it also contained the primordial elements of fire, air, earth and water, and these energies, they coalesced into pools of power for which elemental spirits took physical shape for the first time in Draenor's history. The spirit of life had kept them in check all this time, but since the spore mounds had started numbing on it, now we see the rise of the Furies. There was Incineratus, Aborius, Gordog and Calandrios. These 4 Furies mourned the death of Grond, and they vowed to dwell in his corpse shadow forever, a place that we now know as the Throne of Elements. Now way high up above, Agramar was still keeping an eye on things, and when he saw the Colossals emerge, he felt hope. Though the creatures were not as mighty as Grond, they were many, and the Titan was confident that they were able to destroy Botan and bring balance to Draenor if he gave them a little bit of help. He made stone discs from Grond's remains, and he branded them with Titan runes of power. These objects were then fused into the Colossal's bodies like armor, and from it the giants were infused with primordial energy, enhancing their strength and resilience. As a final touch, he gifted them with knowledge, the information that he had gathered from watching the Spore Mount fight with Grond, and with that the Colossals began their march. This would be the last time that the creator would watch from above, as he felt in the great dark beyond that a constellar had died, and this was very serious, something that had to be checked out. And as we learned from Volume 1, Agramar ended up in a confrontation with Sargeras, and he lost his life, so Draenor, it was now on its own, and the war between the Colossals and the Janissar, that was still going on. This war would rattle Draenor for thousands of years, with control of the world constantly ebbing and flowing between the Colossals and the agents of the Evergrove. Both sides took a lot of punches, and like what happened when Grond fell and the remains turned into Colossals, when Colossals fell, their remains turned into Magnaron, not as large or intelligent as the Grond, but they did command great power. The Colossals tried to recruit the Magnarons to help them in this war, but although the Magnaron, they were against the Evergrove, they felt no loyalty towards the Colossals. With the numbers falling, the Colossals knew that something drastic had to be done. Most of them gathered to make their final stand as they rushed into the Evergrove and they swarmed Botan. In unison, the Colossals unleashed the energy stored within the Titan relics, channeling it through themselves into Botan, and a massive explosion ripped through the Spore Mount and the Colossals. The blast was so immense that it shattered their bodies and it hurled to pieces across Draenor. Botan's death rattle that blazed through every root and leaf in the world. Forests withered and hundreds of Janissar dropped dead where they stood. For one brief moment, the entirety of the Evergrove trembled with the shared agony of Botan's annihilation. Then there was only silence. No thoughts or emotions passed among the world's plant life. Botan's demise had destroyed the shared sentience that connected Draenor's wilds. In the end, the Colossals had triumphed, but they had paid a terrible price. No creature would ever arise from their remains again. Drawing on the power of these Titan relics, it had burned away all life essence from the Colossals, and it seared their corpses. Over time, their broken bodies would sink into the earth, and they became veins of metal called black rock ore.
Now, unlike the fallen Colossals, Botan's body still contained potent life energies. Wherever fragments of the Spore Mound fell to the earth, forest and jungle started to bloom. The majority of Botan's corpse that formed a vibrant region that would later be known as Farallon, the same Farallon that we all wanted to see during Warlords of Draenor, but only our followers got the chance. Janissar and other plant creatures, they would continue to thrive in these havens of life, but they would not have a Spore Mound to unite them in purpose and guide their collective will. The Evergrove was no more, but that did not mean peace for Draenor. When Botan exploded, its body had released countless of spores filled with the spirit of life. These spores drifted back to the world's surface and it warped whatever they touched. They clung to the hides of Magnerons and weakened their bodies. Some of them devolved into half-flesh, half-stone giants called the Gron, who were only moderately intelligent, but because of lingering spores, some of them devolved even further into the one-eyed Ogron. They were more intelligent than the Gron, but they were not as strong. Now the Ogron, they feared the Gron, and they viewed the Hulking beast as gods. The evolution did not end there though. Over thousands of years, the Ogron, they transformed into fleshy creatures called ogres. These brutes were smaller than the Ogron, and many would become their slaves. From the ogres came another race, one that we can actually play as, namely the orcs. They were the smallest of Gron's line, but what they lacked in strength, they made up with fierce intellect and a sense of community. By banding together, they survived the savage world of Draenor. So this group, the descendants of Gron, the Magneron, the Gron and the Ogron, they're known as the Breakers, and despite being different from each other, they still felt the original purpose and they continued fighting with the Primals. The Primals, they're the Janissar and the other plant-based life. Now the Primals, they tracked the origin back to the Spore Mounds, and like the Breakers, many of the Primals came out of the aftermath of Botan's destruction. The numerous spores released from the giant's corpse, it settled in the wilds, and while these spores weakened the creatures of stone, they had the opposite effect on plant life. The spore gave sentience to existing form of plants. The jungles now stirred as new beings took shape and walked the land. Some were small and simple-minded creatures, like the podlings and the sporelings, while the most intelligent, they were called the Botani. These bark-skinned creatures spread through Draenor's wilderness, with faint memories of the Evergrove still lingering in their minds, but they didn't know the full truth of the Spore Mounds or the battles with Grond and the Colossals. Even so, what little the Botani did know of the Evergrove, it still had an impact on their culture. They worshipped the Janissar's gods, seeing them as echoes of the great Spore Mounds. The Botani also rejected the idea of self, believing that their individual souls, that it was part of a collective spirit that interlinked all plant life on Draenor. Along with the Janissar and other plant creatures, the Botani devoted themselves to protecting the forest lands. As they did so, they inevitably clashed with the Breakers, and the war for dominance over the land that kept on going, something that we could see for ourselves during Warlords of Draenor. So that's the basic foundation for life on Draenor, right? This colossal battle between stone and nature, which gave birth to many creatures and races on the planet. Where on Azeroth, it was a direct involvement from the Titan Keepers and the Titans and the Curse of Flesh. Here it was done by Agramar and the influence of the Spirit of Life. It did more than just evolve the Breakers and the Primals though. It also gave birth to many kinds of animals, and with the end of the Evergrove, these animals, this life, actually had a chance to survive. The scattered remains of Botan that had become a forest full with the spirit of life, and these energies, it transformed the land and accelerated the development of new species. The first beasts to rise up out of this were enormous creatures that wielded extraordinary power over the land. Some of them had an affinity to nature magics, some of them tapped into Draenor's elemental energies, while others they reached beyond the veil of reality, touching the forces of light and void that permeated the cosmos. Now being such massive beasts, it also made them massive targets, whereas the Botani, they would ensnare them for food to nourish the wilds, or to infest them with fungi that transformed them into their minions, while the Grun and Ogron, they also hunted the beasts for sport. Those that had wings and were able to fly above all of these predators, they had a much bigger chance to thrive. It was within Arak where most of these avian races developed, and there 3 godlike creatures took form. There was the majestic firebird called Rukmar, touched by the primordial force of light, the vicious wind serpent Sepha with an affinity to the void, and the cunning raven Anzu, whose keen intellect it had led to him investigating the magical ley lines on Draenor, and he discovered arcane magic. At first, these 3 worked together on claiming Arak for the feathery kind by kicking out the Breakers and the primal influence, but over time Sepha became jealous of Rukmar. He could not fly as high as she could. He was doomed to live out an existence in her shadow, so he tried to make an allegiance with Anzu to bring down Rukmar, absorb her powers, and together they would be the twin kings of Arak. What Sepha hadn't counted on was that Anzu felt no envy or jealousy toward Rukmar, quite the opposite. He adored her, and he never had the courage to confess his feelings. With this knowledge, this betrayal at hand, he went to her, and together they took on Sepha, who in his final moments unleashed a terrible curse. Fearing that the curse might destroy Arak, Anzu devoured the wind serpent, and he locked the dark energies within himself. The curse then twisted his body and soul, warping his form and removing his ability to fly. Anzu figured that if he was not worthy of Rukmar before, now she would be disgusted with the being that he had become. He hid away in the realm of shadows while Rukmar did try to find him, tried to thank him. When her search proved to be futile, she decided to honor his sacrifice in a different way by creating the Arakoa. She drew on her life energies to transform some of her Kaliri followers, who embodied Rukmar's physical grace and majesty, as well as Anzu's intellect and cleverness. These heirs of Aruk, they would make their home in what would become known as the Spires of Aruk, and as we've seen in-game, the Curse of Sepha, it will play a massive role in the future of their people. We'll do a full story on the Arakoa at some point in time, since there's a lot of things to talk about. There are a lot of interesting things, especially the Apexis crystals, but since I didn't want to trigger anybody, let's finish this video with talking about the origin of a couple more races. Now, as I mentioned before, ogres were enslaved to the Ogron, and the Arakoa desired the Ogron to fall. They saw an opportunity in their slaves, their anger and their hate. The Arakoa decided to use them to do the dirty work, and taught them the ways of arcane magic. Considering that they come from the line of Grunt, a creature empowered by the Titan Agramar, they were naturally attuned to the arcane, and they picked up these new spellcasting techniques without any real efforts. With their affinity to the earth, they could combine their arcane magic and shape and bend rock and stone to their will. One of the first ogres to master these new techniques, he was called Gok, and instead of simply taking on the Ogron, this ogre had bigger ambitions, and he decided to go even higher up in the food chain. He targeted the Grun. Gok single-handedly struck down a Grun, and another and another. By the time that he defeated his 5th Grun, whispers of his deeds had reached almost all of the ogre settlements, and if one of them was able to bring down the Grun, what did they have to fear from the Ogron? When Gok, the Grun Slayer, returned to his people, they rose up together and they toppled their Ogron overlords. The ogres' use of sorcery and their exposure to raw arcane magic, it also had some unexpected side effects. Though it was very rare, sometimes their children would be born with 2 heads instead of 1. These 2-headed ogres, they were astonishingly gifted spellcasters, and their appearance was seen as a good omen. In time, the ogres even developed spells to replicate this, causing normal ogres to grow a 2nd head, increasing their intelligence and aptitude for magic. Many years later, this technique would be used by the Ogre Cho'Gall and the Warlock Kil'jaeden to empower the ogres of the Horde during the invasion of Azeroth. The rise of the ogres, it changed the hierarchy of survival all across the Draenor. By breaking the power of the Ogron and the Grunt, they had eliminated the 2 of the greatest threats to the Gorgrond orcs, and they were no longer confined to the underground caverns and were now able to forge permanent settlements on the world's surface for the first time in generations. The population of orcs exploded, and overcrowding became a serious problem, so much so that many of them migrated out of Gorgrond, and they settled all across Draenor in individual clans. They found a way to shamanism and the furies of Draenor, something that the ogres first laughed at, but then came to realize that the elements were no joke and they could offer great power. Rather than seeking to learn this power with the same humility and awe that the orcs had done, the ogres decided to take it by force. They claimed the Throne of Elements for the Gorian Empire, and they started dissecting it with the arcane spellwork, examining every inch of the site. Unknown to the ogres was that this land was the final resting place of Grunt, a massive giant empowered by Agramar, infused with a mix of raw titan and elemental power that still lingered in the ancient giant remains. Their careless experiments, it ended in disaster as the energies ignited in an explosion. The temple that the orcs had carved out of the giant skull, it was blown apart and destroyed, but even worse, the elements were thrown out of balance. Huge storms started lashing out across the world, and the tormented elementals cried out to the orc shamans for help. The different clans, they met up at the Kosh-Ark festival, and they decided to unite against the threat of the ogres, pushing them back all the way to the capital city of Goria. Months passed, and despite the ogres thinking that they'd be able to survive a long-term siege, it turned out that was not the case, and they needed to come up with a plan. They decided to use their knowledge on the Arakoa Curse of Sepha, and they began experimenting with ways to cause a similar affliction among the orcs. They were successful, and a disease known as the Red Pox, it spread like wildfire through the orcs' encampments. It was highly contagious, it lasted for months, and it killed many of the infected. The orcs saw their numbers massively dwindle, and they knew that something drastic had to be done. They asked the elements to annihilate Goria, and the elemental spirits understood that there was no other way to stop the ogres from meddling with the Throne of Elements. The shamans gathered outside Goria's mighty walls, and they witnessed the true fury of the spirits as a roaring storm, massive earthquakes, lightning and fire, it enveloped the city. The elements let none inside Goria survive, as the earth itself, it wrenched open like a giant maw, and it swallowed the remains of a once great city. That was the end of Goria, and this means that the Orcish clans, they united even before the formation of the Horde, and the Red Pox, that was a disease that would not simply disappear, and it flares up from time to time. Garros Hellscream was actually a victim of the Red Pox, which is why he didn't join his father during the invasion of Azeroth, and is also the reason why some of the orcs that they kept a brown skin color, since they were separated from the rest of them as they started to use fel magic, drink demon blood, and turned green. Now, with the fall of the Gorian Empire, the orcs claimed more and more land on Draenor, even going as far as rising up from their slave masters in Heimal and breaking the ogres' hold underground. This turn of events, it greatly troubled the Bladespire ogres and their leader Imperator Kelgrok, who saw that all across Draenor the ogre influence was waning. They were determined to regain control within Frostfire Ridge, and to make up for the lack of numbers, their sorcerers had conducted cruel experiments to create new creatures whom they could use to fill their labor force. The most promising result that came from selecting breeding between ogres and enslaved orcs, giving birth to the Magnafal, which you might remember Rexxar being a part of. These Magnafal, they were forced into servitude, but were eventually liberated by the combined might of the Orcish Whiteclaw clan and the Frostwolf clan, who was led by Chieftain Garad, who made his two sons, Durthan and Ganar, his lieutenants. The first son, Fenris, he had already left the clan at this point, and he had joined the Thunderlord clan, which is why they refused to help in this battle. Together, the Whiteclaw and the Frostwolf, they were able to liberate the Magnafal, but it came at a great price. Hundreds of Frostwolves and Whiteclaws had died in battle, including Ganar. He had sacrificed his life while helping many of the young Magnafal to escape the besieged fortress. Now, Ganar's death, it broke his father's heart, something that he would never truly recover from, and despite offering the Magnafal to join them in Frostfire Ridge, the elder declined, knowing that the orcs would never truly accept the half-breeds. Instead, they settled in Gorgrond, where the resources, they would be scarce, but at least they could live out their lives in peace. I was actually surprised to see that they stuck with the whole forced pregnancy route, since it seemed like they wanted to get away from it, but the Magnafal are confirmed to be a forced union between Ogre and Orc, and we have another one that's a forced half-breed, which is Orc, and a race not native to Draenor, namely the Draenei. They crash-landed on the planet, while being on the run from Sargeras after refusing to join the Legion, and they built the city of Shefrev upon the site where once upon a time Goria was swallowed by the earth. As you might imagine, the ogres were not too happy about this, and they tried to retaliate, but the Draenei's forces and defenses, they were more than capable at holding these ogres off, and after doing some massive damage, Velen issued a single statement. His voice rumbled through the heavens. "Go home, and you will not be harmed." The ogres did not need any more motivation, they fled, and they would never try a frontal assault on the Draenei again. This soft nature of the Draenei, this forgiveness, it was also evident when the orcs went on the attack. Before, they had seen the Draenei as mostly harmless, but that was no longer the case after they witnessed how they took care of the ogres. Some clans decided to avoid all contact, while others decided to treat them as enemies. If the strangers would come into their territory, they would attack. The Bladewing clan, that took it one step further, as they lived in the area between Terakar and Nagrand, and they knew of the Draenei's favorite trading routes and caravan schedules. They launched raids on these caravans, they murdered the Draenei, and they took some of them prisoner. Most of the Draenei wanted to retaliate. The clan that was attacking them, it was not large, and it would be relatively easy to defeat them, but Velen forbade it. He did allow the Rangari to launch rescue missions, but an offensive campaign that would only lead to calamity. Orcs did not surrender, and a war would not end until nearly all of the Bladewinds had died. And then what? The other clans would surely take notice and pick up arms as well, so instead they decided to upgrade the protection of the caravans and save as many prisoners as they could. Save as many, not all though, and those who were not rescued, those few poor souls, they were forced into slavery for the rest of their lives. Some of them even bore children for their masters, their half-breed offspring scorned and reviled by both Draenei and Orc cultures. Half Orc, half Draenei, and one of these that you're probably familiar with, that is Garona half Orcan. Those that are familiar with her storyline, you know that it was originally said that she was created out of the orders of Kil'jaeden, out of his breeding program. But that's now changed, and so a few other details when it comes to the whole Rise of the Horde storyline. However, that's a story we're going to save for next week though. Right now we've established how most of the races on Draenor evolved and came to be. Next week we'll talk about the ramifications of Kil'jaeden tracking down the Draenei and starting the events that would eventually lead to the invasion of Azeroth. This week we're going to talk about the differences when it comes to the whole Rise of the Horde and invasion of Azeroth storyline, which begins with the Draenei, who were forced to make a crash landing on the planet. Velen and those that stood with him, they refused to join Sargeras and the Legion, and the Naru, Kur, Kaara and Dor, they aided the exiles as they move around in the dimensional fortress called the Genadar. Traveling like that, it cost immense amounts of energy which came from the Naru spirits, and over time they weakened. The time for running, it eventually came to an end as they were forced to crash on a planet that the Draenei named Draenor, meaning exile's refuge. As they made the final journey, the Naru Kar, it lost its touch with the connection to the light, and the void began to consume it. As a final good act, it was able to convince the Draenei to eject it from their ship before we start to fight its fellow Naru, but that was easier said than done though, since the void energy, it was coursing through its body and it started to lash out. Velen heroically stepped in. He used the light to shield the other two Naru, and they cast Kara away from the vessel. For centuries, Kara would drift in the skies above Shadowmoon Valley, but the battle had injured Velen and it sapped much of his strength. His ability to foresee future events, it became unreliable, and it would take him centuries to fully recover. The other two Naru, they were too weak to land on Draenor safely, and as the vessel crashed into the ground, it killed Dor and many of the Draenei on board. Kur, the last Naru standing, it told the survivors to quickly leave the ship as it too was decaying and was turning towards the void. Velen and the Draenei, they were truly alone, and as far as they knew, this would be the last world that they would ever see. They built the city of Shefref upon the site where once Goria was devoured. They built Karabor, which would become one of the most beautiful and holiest sites, and they built Akendun. This was to house the remains of Dor, who had been starting to draw in the souls of the dead Draenei, and the same had happened with Kur, only that one started to draw in the souls of departed orcs. Ka'ara became known as the Dark Star for the Shadowmoon clan, and they worshipped it, even trying to access its power, but touching those void energies, you might imagine that's not too good for your health, and it shattered their minds, and soon enough they decided that the Dark Star's power, that was not meant to be wielded by mortals. If anyone continued messing with it, they would be exiled out of their Shadowmoon Valley. So here we have the Draenei introduced to the world of Draenor, and their coming had a massive impact on the world. The ogres were not happy with them building upon Goria, but the Draenei, they repelled them easily enough, which showed the orcs that the Draenei, they were not as harmless as they had thought. Some decided to stay away from them, some attacked them if they'd go into their territory, and the Bladewing clan, they decided to attack their caravans and take some of the Draenei prisoners. It would have been easy for the Draenei to destroy this clan, but Velen forbade it, fearing that this would lead to an all-out war with the orcs, and instead decided to go for rescue missions and better protection for the caravans. All the Draenei wanted was to live in peace on Draenor and not cause any harm, something that was clearly shown when two young orcs, Orgrim and Durotan, they were saved from an attacking Heimal ogre by the Draenei. They were even invited to sit down with the Prophet, who took the moment and observed the orcs, and he found no hatred in their hearts, quite the opposite. This meeting would be one of the last peaceful encounters between the orcs and the Draenei, as the Legion had found their targets. Now, I'm not going to go into complete details when it comes to origin story. I'm going to assume that you're familiar with it, and we're going to focus mainly on the changes. Like before, it was Talgoth that found the Draenei. Since their crash landing on the planet, it had sent out massive waves of holy energy throughout the twisting nether, and this drew his attention. Like before, he observed the orcs and he reported back to Kil'jaeden, who ordered his servant to stay out of this conflict as they would turn the orcs against the Draenei. Talgoth was quite pissed about this. He had not spent millennia hunting the Draenei just so that the primitive orcs could spill their blood. Normally Kil'jaeden would have punished such insubordination, but he understood the anger, yet was unmoved, and he sent his servant away. He needed an agent, an orc that could manipulate the rest of their people to follow Kil'jaeden's will, and although there were many candidates amongst the orc, none of them had such potential as Gul'dan. He was born with a physical weakness into a small clan at the edge of Gorgrond, and the other orcs saw his twisted form as an ill omen, and they eventually exiled him. The elder shaman took pity on Gul'dan and told him to go to the throne of elements, and there he might find his purpose in life from the spirits. The spirits, they gazed upon Gul'dan, and they sensed the darkness and fury in the orc's heart, and they rejected him.
But in their absence, other voices whispered.
Kil'jaeden promised Gul'dan power, enough power that no one would ever pity him again, and he would become like a god, if only he would help the Legion with turning the orcs into a weapon to destroy the Draenei. The first orcish warlock was born in that moment, as Gul'dan gladly accepted the dark bargain. He informed his new master of a time where the orcs came together against the threat to save the elements from the ogre's influence. If Kil'jaeden could recreate that elemental upheaval, perhaps the clans would repeat history, so he guided Gul'dan, they attacked the throne of elements with fell magic, and the elements elements were thrown into chaos. Long droughts were followed by heavy rain, floods devastated regions in Gorgrond and parts of Nagrand, snowstorms blanketed parts of the Nan jungle and Terragar forest in ice. Rivers and streams soon enough dried up, which caused the wildlife to die by the thousands, and this caused massive suffering to the orcs. Their shamans could offer no guidance since they could no longer properly communicate with the elements, and Gul'dan used his magic to throw in a bit of rat pox, which took out a whole lot of orcs. One amongst those who fell to this disease was Chieftain Garad of the Frostwolf clan, which left his son Duratan to lead them all, and as you can imagine, the orcs were desperate for answers. Gul'dan was a perfect ally for the Legion, but the orcs would never follow someone like him. They needed a figurehead under their control, which the orcs would trust, whose words the orcs would trust, and it was the Shaman Ner'zhul of the Shadowmoon clan, respected by many, that was the perfect target. After engulfing the clan of his birth in Felfire to make sure that nobody knew where he came from, Gul'dan infiltrated the Shadowmoon clan, hiding away his fel powers, and he gained Ner'zhul's trust. He even managed to become Ner'zhul's apprentice, and through Gul'dan, Kil'jaeden began to twist Ner'zhul's thoughts. As Kil'jaeden did his thing with Ner'zhul, Gul'dan was sent on a different task. The orcs were in peril, they were working on Ner'zhul, somebody that the orcs could trust, and now the orcs had to believe that the Draenei were the enemy, and it was Gul'dan who would make it so. The Bladewind clan had suffered greatly from the elemental unrest and the red pox, which has claimed the lives of 70% of their clan. The warlock approached them as a representative of the Shadowmoon clan, and he convinced them that the Draenei were the ones responsible for their problems. If they were to spill the blood of the Draenei, such an act would surely appease the elemental spirits. As all orcs, the Bladewinds held the Shadowmoon in high regard, and they had no reason to distrust Gul'dan. They did as they were told, and they assaulted Draenei caravans in greater numbers than ever before. They murdered dozens of innocents and took just as many prisoners. One of those prisoners was Liren, sister of Marad, who could sit by no longer. Velen still tried to maintain the peace, but when the Rangari reported back with information about the brutal sacrifices that were being made, he reluctantly agreed, and the Draenei fought back. Marad was sadly enough too late to save his sister, and the sight of her mutilated dead body, it enraged him and he rampaged through the village. The Bladewinds were desperate to please the elements, so they fought until nearly every one of them were dead, and those that did try to escape, they were struck down by Gul'dan. He was enjoying the show from a distance, and none would survive to tell the truth of what had happened that day. Only Gul'dan's version would make it out, as he told the Shadowmoon clan all about how the Draenei had launched an unprovoked slaughter against the Bladewinds. Word of this quickly spread amongst the other clans, and the seed of hatred towards the Draenei, it took roots. Now, just as before in the original story, Kil'jaeden used the image of the orc ancestral spirits like Rokan for Ner'zhul to confirm what Gul'dan had told them. The Horde was formed, the war was on, but Ner'zhul began to doubt and he made his way to Oshugan to communicate with the spirits. In this version, Kil'jaeden is actually aware of his plans and he told Gul'dan to prepare, to find those who could help him keep control of the Shadowmoon clan, as Ner'zhul turned out not to be the leader that the Demon Lord had hoped him to be. The real ancestors informed Ner'zhul about what was going on, but by the time that he got back, it was already far too late. Gul'dan and his followers, they took Ner'zhul before he could reach his clan, and despite many of the new warlocks wishing to murder Ner'zhul, Gul'dan forbade it, as Kil'jaeden, he wanted Ner'zhul to watch what would become of the orcish race. Besides this delicious torture, it was also out of necessity, since Ner'zhul suddenly disappearing, that would raise suspicion amongst the other clans. In the months to come, Gul'dan and his warlocks would constantly abuse Ner'zhul and treat him as little more than a slave. The elder shaman feared death, and he would become too weak to disobey his masters. Over time, he would fade from the public eye, and his usurpers would become the voice of the Shadowmoon clan. While the Horde was fighting against the Draenei just as Kil'jaeden wanted, they were also fighting amongst each other. Especially chieftains like Gromar's Hellscream and Blackhand, they argued over battle tactics, and Kil'jaeden understood that what the orcs needed was a leader. They needed a war chief. It was Blackhand that was the best choice, and despite Gul'dan being pretty pissed at him not being the war chief, his fear for Kil'jaeden, it prevented him from speaking out. After teaching some of the Blackrock shamans the way of the warlock, and magically aging and empowering their young, Blackhand agreed to take up leadership of the Horde, while it was actually Gul'dan and the Shadow Council, they were the ones who were pulling the strings from behind the curtains. This council consisted of those trusted and loyal to Gul'dan, but not just orcs were accepted. For example, there was Garona half-Orcan, a union between a Bladewind orc and a Draenei slave that proved to be a ferocious fighter, and she possessed a keen intelligence and a gift with learning new languages. Originally, it was said that Marad's sister was Garona's mother, and although it's still not entirely impossible, I think that the way that they describe the events in the Chronicles, the time period of just 2 years, that just seems to be a bit too short. Either way, Garona managed to escape the Bladewind clan when they were destroyed by the Draenei, and eventually encountered the Shadow Council. Gul'dan sympathized with her to earn her trust, seeing how they both knew the pain of living as an outcast, and the moment that she let down her guard, the Shadow Council struck. They placed magical spells on her mind, which kept her obedient, and it allowed Gul'dan to see what she saw, and they used her as the perfect assassin.
Gul'dan sends his best.
Another non-orc example to join the council, that was the ogre Cho'Gall. Where Garona was an outcast, Cho'Gall had enjoyed the good life within High Maul, where he had learned from the most talented ogre sorcerers. His arrogance and lust for power, they put him at odds with the ruling elite, as they feared that his growing popularity that it would allow him to take control of the city, so they made an attempt on his life. He barely survived his attempt, but now he had no other choice but to flee High Maul, thirsting for vengeance, and he came across the Shadow Council. Gul'dan could appreciate his confidence and lust for power. He made him his foremost apprentice, and he taught him the secrets of fel magic, and informed him about the Burning Legion. Cho'Gall was loyal to Gul'dan for the moment, but he was also more than willing to break ties at any time. He only desired the power, and he was not interested in the Legion or the demons or Gul'dan's massive plans. The moment that Gul'dan and the Shadow Council ceased being useful, Cho'Gall was prepared to turn his back on them.
We're done taking orders from you.
With his own personal council to back him up, Gul'dan worked on making the other clans accept Blackhand as the war chief. His Shadow Council agents were sent out to spread the word of Blackhand's mighty deeds, while also spying on the clans to see who opposed the Horde. A prime target that was identified was Chieftain Zagrel of the Whiteclaw clan, who called on all the other clans to end this senseless war of the Draenei and focus their attention on shamanistic rituals. One quick command to Garona and one dagger through the heart, and that opposing voice was silenced. To seal the deal, Gul'dan preyed on the fears of the shaman at the next Kosh-Ark festival, and he proclaimed that the Black Rocks had restored their strength with glorious new power, namely fel magic. Shamans of all clans eagerly accepted his new power, since the elements, they no longer answered the calls, and unanimously the Horde accepted Blackhand as their chieftain. Like the original story, Durotan of the Frostwolf clan, he was not happy with what was happening to his people, but he feared that speaking out would mean dire consequences for him and his clan, just like what had happened to the Whiteclaw clan. Blackhand was quite the leader, and he whipped the Horde into shape. So far they had just tossed their people at the Draenei, but he worked on utilizing the strengths of the different clans. The smallest and most mobile, they would act as scouts, whereas the other stronger clans, they would lead the direct assaults. Now, not all of the orcs were immediately on board with his new leadership, but they were either won over with offers of power, or by public execution, since Blackhand did not take kindly to insubordination. To help him with maintaining order and discipline, he surrounded himself with mighty lieutenants, and the greatest of them were Eitric, Orgrim Doomhammer, and Varrock Sourfang. A new leader and order amongst the ranks, that was all great, but the Horde needed more numbers, and to bolster this, the clans were ordered to also magically age their children, and the first signs of the fel corruption that started to show. Durotan noticed that their brown skin was becoming splotchy and green. While the Horde was rising, news reached Gul'dan about the Pale in the Grand. These are the orcs that were sent into exile after following their shamanistic ritual, and they were drawn to the Naru Kur within Oshugan. This Naru was still spilling forth the delicious void energy, and the Pale started to study this power and communicate with the Void Lords. The monstrous entities responded to the orcs, bombarding them with visions of apocalypse and revealing the secrets of using shadow magic. The void energies would over time turn their skin white, and they would start to call themselves the Pale. Now Gul'dan, he wasn't too interested in them, but Kil'jaeden was intrigued. He wanted the orcs to secure victory over the Draenei at any cost, which meant that they had to investigate the Pale and determine whether their magic could strengthen the Horde. It was Cho'Gall who was sent out to investigate, and while he expected them to put up a fight, the Pale were quite happy to share the prophecy of doom, something that they called the Hour of Twilight. The Pale saw this as a time when shadow would envelop the universe and snuff out all life in existence.
Make peace with your end, for the Hour of Twilight falls.
In that very moment, their prophecies meant very little to the ogre. He was far more interested in the shadow magic that they could wield, and he used the beliefs to his advantage, claiming that if they would help the Horde, they could bring about the Hour of Twilight. The Pale reveled in this opportunity, and they pledged themselves to the Horde, forming a whole new clan known as the Twilight's Hammer. Over time, Cho'Gall would also learn to master this shadow magic, and he would see the truth in the Pale's prophecy. That's still a while away though. Now with the Horde gathering their forces and building their citadel, the Draenei saw the truth of what was going on. They saw that the Legion was involved. They made ready to defend their two main cities, namely Shefrev and Karabor, abandoning all their outlying settlements. The Horde's use of fel magic, and they began killing the planet of Draenor, and the elements rallied together, vowing to destroy the orcs and stop the desecration of the land. By pooling their dwindling powers together, they created one single mighty being called Kirak the Fire Lord. This was supposed to stop the threat of the Horde, but Gul'dan would not give up that easily. Now many of the orcs, they saw this attack as a sign of angering the elements, but Gul'dan managed to flip it around. By pooling their powers together, the elements had made themselves vulnerable, and he would make them pay. He would steal Kyrok's power for himself and the rest of the Horde, and he would also destroy the connection between the orcs and the elements. With his Shadow Council followers, they wove an immense spell that flooded Kyrok with fell power, and it shattered the being's physical form. The mountain roared in protest, chasms tore through the earth, and rivers of fell and elemental energies it spewed forth. Gul'dan and his warlocks, they used these energies to infuse the other orcs with strength, and now their soldiers were more powerful than ever before. The last stand of the elements, it had dire consequences. The orcs' connection with them was now broken, and what remained, the fell volcano from which Kyrok had emerged, that would be known as the Hand of Gul'dan. With the elemental threat out of the way, Karabor was their next target, and the Draenei put up quite a fight, more than the orcs expected, but it would all be for nothing. The Darkstar, the void energies from the Naru Ka'ara, that was used by the orcs to channel it on Karabor. A massive pillar of void energy ripped through the heavens, and it slammed into the Draenei. Many of the defenders, they died instantly, while others were driven to madness, and Velen had to call on every bit of his willpower to hold the void at bay. He rallied what survivors he could, and he led them through Karabor's harbor to the final safe haven on Draenor. He led them to Shefrev's city. The Temple of Karabor would be forever changed by this attack, and it was now known as the Black Temple, a place where Gul'dan and his Shadow Council would gladly make their home. The remaining Draenei defenders, they were captured for future use, and now only one more target remained to be taken. But the city, built upon the remains of Goria, there was no easy target, and the orcs needed something more. Just like before, they were offered the demon blood. Durathen was warned by Ner'zhul, who had overheard the Shadow Council plans, and he warned him not to drink, while Orgrim, he saw for himself that drinking this so-called gift, that was not a good idea. The majority of the orcs, however, they gladly accepted it, greatly increasing their power, but also shackling themselves to the will of the Legion. Not all of the orcs had drunk from Manora's blood, but those who had, they would radiate a invisible aura of fell energy, and this energy would slowly seep into the skin and bones of nearby orcs. Eventually, even orcs like Durathen and Orgrim and all the others who had not tasted the demon blood, they would find their skin turned completely green, something that was even passed on to the newly born. So here we are, the Draenei make ready to defend their city, and this time it's not the Naru that tell Velen to go, this time it's the Exarchs that tell him that their people need him as a leader, while most of the people, they would stay behind to make it look like the orcs succeeded. The Red Mist, an attack originally used by the Legion, is now explained by Gul'dan and his warlocks melding their magics with the Red Pox, which created a volatile concoction that would spread the plague amongst the Draenei. This burned their skin and choked the breath from their lungs, and the long-term effects was that the Draenei who breathed in the mist, they found their connection to the light was gone. They would devolve into something called the Broken, or even further into something that they called the Lost Ones. With Shefrev's sect, some of its survivors made their way to Anduin, which Gul'dan knew about, and he feared that they would call upon the spirits of their ancestors that would aid them in the war against the Horde. To deal with them, Terangor and some of the forces were sent out, who used their new abilities to try and summon a powerful demon to strike down their enemies. Instead of summoning a demon, they accidentally summoned an otherworldly elemental known as Murmur, and his entry into the world, it sent out a massive shockwave that ripped the earth asunder, killing many of the Draenei inside and leaving Anduin as we know it today. Some of the warlocks, they were left behind to keep Murmur under control, so they could not use its incredible might against the Horde. So Shefrev has now fallen, many of the Draenei are dead, and those that did escape, they held out within the Zangarmarsh. Blackhand had more goals than just exterminate the Draenei though. He wanted to conquer all of Draenor. Kil'jaeden led the Bleeding Hollow into Farallon, leeching life from the primals, and used the stolen power to burn down the forest. As the wilds burned, Kil'jaeden and his army slaughtered every Botania Janissar that they could find. Meanwhile, the Warsong and the Twilight Clan, they toppled the ogres of Highmaul, while Frostwolf, Whiteclaw and Thunderlord, they were ordered to wipe out the Grun, Ogron and Magnaron and many of the ogres that had not joined the Horde. One of the few Grun that actually survived this assault, he was called Gruul, and he would defend his lair in Gorgrond. Not even the Arakoa were safe from the might of the Horde, as Kardak of Bladefist, he formed an invasion force from the Shattered Hand, the Burning Blade and the Dragonmaw clans. They made a pact with the Arakoa outcast, who joined them in this fight, but in the end Kardak, he turned his blade on all the Arakoa that he could find, either murdering them on the spot, or tossing them in the cursed blood of Sephe, enjoying the sight of the High Arakoa writhing in agony. Only a small number of the Arakoa would actually survive, shrouding themselves in the shadows, hiding away from the Horde in the deepest corners of Terakar Forest. Some of the Arakoa banded together under the leadership of a former Skyreach guard named Krizik, who led his followers to Anduin, knowing that most of the orcs feared the haunted ruins. He held on to a bitter hatred for the Horde, and he waited for the day when he might get his vengeance on those who had spilled the blood of his people. Now this is where one of the more interesting changes to the storyline take place. In the past, Kil'jaeden saw that the city of Sephiroth had fallen, and he just abandoned the orcs to their fate. Time passed, Medivh, under the influence of Sargeras, he made contact with Gul'dan, and he showed him the way to Azeroth. These all seemed very disconnected from each other, like Kil'jaeden was just working on his own, and Sargeras had very little to do with it. Now, it's actually Sargeras that directly ordered Kil'jaeden to cut all communication with Gul'dan, since he wanted them to be desperate enough to embark on any quest if it meant saving their lives. The orcs were powerful weapons that the Lord of the Legion could use to weaken Azeroth and get it ready for an invasion. But before they were ready, they had to come down from the rush of victory, and as time passed on, things didn't get any better for the Horde. Their planet was corrupted and dying, demon blood was pumping in their veins, and with no enemy to fight, they often turned on each other. At just the right moment, Gul'dan was informed about Azeroth, and they created the Dark Portal with not the sacrifice of one single Draenei child. Instead, it were many more, the prisoners that they had taken throughout their long campaign, something that you could also see in the Warcraft movie. The Dark Portal was established, and the Horde made ready for their first invasion of Azeroth. That's the new version of Rise of the Horde in a nutshell, and the story of the war between the Alliance and Horde, that pretty much stayed the same for the most part. There is a bit of additional information when it comes to what Medivh was like, how Lane Rin became the king, but for the most part, it is as we know it. For those wondering, how does Ner'zhul fit in all of this with these changes? Well, it's pretty much the same. The Horde got their asses kicked during the first invasion, Tedangor informs him about the artifacts, and they work on making more portals to different worlds. Near the end of the story, Ner'zhul abandons his people just like he's done before, and this could lead into him becoming the Lich King. Now, it is less of an evil character. In the past, Ner'zhul really took the spotlight, right? And in the Chronicles, that doesn't really happen, but the essence is still the same. Now, to wrap up this video, I have a couple of final things to talk about that really stood out for me. First of all, about Medivh. Medivh was actually summoned to Karazhan by his mother Egwene, and Morus, the butler that you see there, he was actually a close friend of hers who agreed to stay with Medivh and help maintain the tower. Medivh was actually quite a playboy during the day, very similar to the Medivh that we see in One Night at Karazhan, but at night he would do the most awful things. Opening the Dark Portal, that alarmed Egwene, who could sense that a Guardian's power was used to do this, her son's power. So she set out to confront him together with a blue dragon named Archenagos, one of the few allies that she had made during her long years of exile. The truth of Sargeras' corruption was revealed. Archenagos was burned into Nightbane as we know him today, and the Guardians clashed with each other. Sargeras was definitely mighty, but Egwene had experience, so the Demon Lord, he reached out and drained the life of the hundreds of humans who were fleeing the Tower of Karazhan. He pushed Medivh to destroy Egwene once and for all, but a small part of the Guardian, it was still able to resist, and instead she was banished. Not even Medivh knew where he had sent her, but he could not sense her presence anywhere on Azeroth. The only person to survive this brutal attack, that was the human Morus, who was driven half mad by what he had witnessed. Medivh tried to ease his suffering by purging the memories of that day, but even so, the poor man was never the same, and neither was the tower, since it was now haunted by many spirits of those who were used for the spell.
I've gone and made a mess. Now, where was I?
Garona Half-Orcan has a fair few changes in her story arc, mainly with Gul'dan being able to see what she saw. She had a gift for learning new languages, and from the human prisoners she found out about Karazhan and Medivh. She had the hope of inspecting the tower without being noticed, but her timing was pretty bad since Medivh, he was in a dark mood after his deadly battle with Egwene, and he captured Garona the moment that she stepped inside of the tower. The assassin thought that her life was over, but Medivh felt sympathy for her, seeing how she was also an outcast, and he was intrigued by her intelligence, by her entire existence. It was clear to him that Garona was no threat, and thanks to Gul'dan's endless cruelty, she had no real love for the Horde. He decided that it would be more valuable to have her as an ally or even a friend amongst the orcs, rather than another spirit haunting his home, so he set her free and he even invited her to come back whenever she liked. She did just that, something that Medivh's new apprentice Khadgar could not appreciate at first, but over time they developed a friendship and they even discovered that it was Medivh who had opened up the Dark Portal. Once they found out, they quickly escaped the tower to get help from Stormwind, and when Gul'dan realized that Garona was in the same room as King Lane, he tried to use his magic to force her to kill the king, but Garona was actually able to resist this murderous urge. Lothar, Khadgar and Garona, and a couple of forces, they made their way back to the tower, they confronted the Guardian, and in that battle, Medivh assaulted her mind, trying to take control of Gul'dan's mental chains and use her against her allies. His spell work was only partially effective, confusion rippled through the half-orc, and she soon found it impossible to differentiate between friend or foe. She fled the tower and made her way back to Stormwind to inform King Lane of what had happened, but standing near the king, something snapped in her mind.
Bad news, sire.
She had resisted Gul'dan's order to kill the king before, but her fight with the Guardian, it had scrambled her thoughts. The line between friend and foe blurred, her willpower faltered, and with tears streaming down her face, she obeyed the command and plunged the dagger into Lane's heart. This explains why Garona still killed Lane, even though Gul'dan at this point ended up in a coma. This would explain why that still happened. Now, after the assassination, Garona escaped the keep in the confusion that followed, and without their king, Stormwind eventually fell to the Horde. But as we all know, the Alliance of Lordaeron would win the war over Azeroth. They shut down the Dark Portal, they built Netherguard Keep to keep an eye on things, and it was there where Garona made contact with Khadgar. She had fought her way back into control, she shrugged away as many of Gul'dan's lingering mental chains as she could, and she confessed to killing the king, and Khadgar believed her when she told him that she had no choice. He could see the Shadow Council spellwork still woven through her thoughts, and the next few months they worked on unraveling the Council's hold on Garona. They were actually successful, and for the first time in her life, Garona was free. In gratitude, she offered to do whatever she could to hunt down the Shadow Council still left on Azeroth, an offer that Khadgar gladly accepted. Eventually, the Dark Portal reopened, and the Horde came back for the second invasion, and despite wishing to join the Alliance forces as they took the battle to Draenor, Khadgar requested her to stay behind and keep on hunting the Shadow Council. Her journey would eventually put her on the trail of Cho'Gall to the mysterious lands of Kalimdor, while the Sons of Lothar, they did their best to prevent the Horde from invading different planets, eventually being forced to shut down the portal on Draenor's side. Now, what's really interesting is that there's no mention of a love relation between Medivh and Garona. There's no mention of a pregnancy or Medan. We already knew that Blizzard had made the decision to retcon the events with Medan in the comics, but they haven't explained what exactly did happen. Cutting out Medan is fine and all, but it doesn't explain what happens with Cho'Gall, the Twilight Hammer, the events of Garona and Cthulhu and Varian, all those events in the comics. It doesn't explain what exactly happened. Hopefully, we'll find that information in the next Chronicle, and I've said this many times now, but I can highly recommend picking up the Chronicle for yourself. There are a lot more details that I haven't touched upon yet, like how the different Orcish clans migrated, Deathwing, the artifacts that they needed. Those storylines will be incorporated in future lore videos.
My son, a terrible darkness has returned to our world. As before, it seeks to annihilate everything that we hold dear. I go to face it, knowing I may not return.
They're coming! They're coming back!
Anduin, I now believe, as you do, that peace is the noblest aspiration. But to preserve it, you must be willing to fight for the Alliance.
Hello everyone! With patch 7.2, we return to the site where the Alliance lost their king. We have learned much, gained many allies, and taken down many of our enemies. We're working our way to assault the Tomb of Sargeras itself, to seal off the Legion gateway and stop this Legion invasion. Off the coast, at Forlorn Depths, we find a battered trinket. Its brass exterior is inlaid with an intricate filigree, though much of the detail has been battered by rocks and waves. Clearing away the grime and salt encresped in the clasp, we managed to open it and figure out that this was a compass, or was at least. The glass face is shattered, the needle is bent and is unmoving. Set into the lids is a portrait. The paint is faded and waterlogged, but the subject is unmistakable. It's the face of young Anduin Rin. This was the compass used by his father as they made their way to the broken shore, so he returned it to the king at Stormwind Keep.
Be vigilant. I had this compass crafted for my father's birthday. I gave it to him a few months before my ship ran aground on Pandaria. A lifetime ago. Since this war with the Legion began, I've barely had a chance to think, or breathe, or to mourn. Perhaps it's time to change that. Thank you for bringing my father's compass back to me. It is a reminder of how much I miss him.
The very next day, Captain Swader of the Stormwind Royal Guard is waiting for us at Deliverance Point. Our presence has been requested by the Royal Court since the Crown has urgent need of us. King Greymane, who is apparently healed from his wounds inflicted by Sylvanas, is anticipating our swift arrival.
Our guest arrives. Perhaps now there is hope of reaching the king.
Anduin is nowhere to be seen and hasn't been the same since we brought him his father's compass. He's become listless, distracted. Yesterday morning he left the keep without so much a word. The Royal Guard has been ordered to follow him to the cathedral, where he is gone to pray, and since we're the ones who brought this melancholy upon him, Greymane believes that we must convince the boy to resume his duties.
Anduin refuses to eat or sleep. He ignores every plea to return to the palace. Nothing I say seems to offer comfort.
I understand the need to mourn, but the king's place is on his throne. The broken shore must be our focus. Convince Anduin to end his vigil.
At the cathedral, we find the king, who wonders if Greymane is more concerned about his well-being or keeping up the appearance that everything is normal. His father was a legend, oversaw the rebuilding of Stormwind, stood toe-to-toe with dragons, has led the Alliance to numerous of victories. Then, one day, he was gone. Anduin wears his crown, he holds his title, but he has done nothing to earn them, or the faith of his people. He has spent the war in the keep, surrounded by guards and advisors. He feels the need to walk the streets of Stormwind, to know whether it is hope or fear that beats in the heart of his people, and we're welcome to accompany him.
I'll need a disguise to move through the city without attracting attention. I think I know just the spell. Follow me.
This disguise is so good that not even the royal guards notice that Anduin's walking away. Nope, no Anduin here. I think it's time to get some new guards.
Stormwind has always been my home. I know its shops and streets as I do the back of my hand. Yet, even as I walk these familiar steps, I've never felt more lost.
Jenny Winslow had her cousin's body brought from a broken shore last week, and she expects a lot more to follow. At least we're safe here in Stormwind. King Rin will keep the city safe, Roy Pitt says, but Jenny is not convinced. How exactly will he keep an endless army of demons from invading and killing everyone?
They're right to be afraid. If we fail to stop the Legion on the broken shore, the demons will strike us here, at our home and hearth.
Further down the road, we find some kids playing Power Rangers, playing kings, and one of them is going to be King Anduin and kill every demon that he sees. Nah, says Karen, don't be Anduin, be Varian, he was way tougher. Yeah, my dad says so too. Okay, I'm King Varian, look out demons!
I can't blame the lad for his choice. My father sacrificed everything to save his people. He was a great king. I have not returned to Lion's Rest since my father's memorial was moved here from the keep. The war has consumed all of my energy and attention. I've not had a moment to grieve. Since you brought my father's compass back to me, I've prayed to the light for guidance, and to know his spirit is at rest. The light doesn't answer. My people like me, respect me, but they don't believe in me. Not like they believed in him. I've heard the voice of the people, but how do my father's advisors feel? I fear they do not trust me as they did my father. I must know. It seems Gen and Velen are speaking about me, but I can't quite make out the words.
The young king will become a great leader. I have foreseen it.
Visions don't win wars, Prophet. The boy has a good heart, but he's untested.
The light is strong with Anduin. He will grow into his crown. We must have faith.
We need more than that, and so does he. Anduin wasn't there on the broken shore. He hasn't seen the sacrifice his soldiers made, that they continue to make. A king must know the weight of the orders he gives, the price of them. If a compass breaks his spirit, how will he respond when the war arrives on our doorstep?
Anduin believes that they are right, that they are absolutely right. The time has come for him to leave the safety of the keep and travel to the broken shore himself to see the place where his father died. If he is going to be the king that his father was, the king that Stormwind deserves, then he has to know firsthand the threat that his people face. We'll inform his advisors that he is gone, since they only tried to stop him, and will wait for us at Deliverance Point.
Thank you, my friend. I know what I must do to learn the weight of my father's crown. I must go to the Broken Shore and see for myself the sacrifice he made. Let's go. This land is far worse than I had imagined. My father sought to shield me from the war, insisting I stay behind because a Rin must always rule in Stormwind. But I saw the truth in his eyes, his fear of losing me. When my mother died, I was all he had left of her. Come, let us press forward.
This place is filled with indescribable horrors. To think that he was blind to all of this pain and suffering. Never in his life has he seen such destruction, such misery. The very grounds we walk on is paved with the bones of our allies. Even now, the spirits of Alliance soldiers are wandering the ruins. We cannot leave this place without putting the souls of our brave soldiers to rest. Souls that cannot believe that they are dead. They have families that they can't leave behind. How will they survive without them? Some of them were trapped inside the soul engine, which Velen described to be a fate worse than death. And now, where's their body? What happened to them? We speak to the spirits. We tell them to find a way to the light. Find a way to their well-earned rests.
Time and time again, I have watched from afar as the heroes of Stormwind fought and died to preserve peace on Azeroth. My father was not the first king of Stormwind to die fighting the Burning Legion. My great-grandfather, King Barathon, and my grandfather, King Lane, also paid the ultimate sacrifice. The kings of my family have always fought shoulder to shield with their soldiers for the freedom of Stormwind. Come, let us press forward.
King Barathon lost his life while trying to defend Stormwind from its siege by Gurubashi trolls, while King Lane found his end by betrayal, the assassination from Garona half-Orcan. Anduin gazes upon the remains of the fell reaver that forced his father to sacrifice himself. Now that he has seen the broken shore and the terror of the Burning Legion firsthand, his eyes have been opened to the truth. Not the truth of the unfathomable evil of the enemy, but of the bravery and sacrifice that such evil brings about in the heart of our people. His father once told him that every king must carry the weight of his crown, and his has never felt heavier than it does at this very moment.
I have lived my life, sheltered by the blood of heroes like Tyrion and Bolvar. Heroes like my father. The time has come for me to do the same. Take me to the place where my father died. I must see it for myself.
There's one last place to visit, the place where his father died, so that he may honor his sacrifice.
Here. This is where his father fell.
The boy has never known the horrors of the Legion, as we have.
No. I haven't.
Anduin.
How could you just leave?
I had to come here.
My boy, you don't need to see this.
You never surrendered. Even here, at the very end. I cannot do this, Father. I can't be the hero you were. I can't be the king you were.
Anduin, your father's actions were indeed heroic. They were his challenge to us, his people, to never let fear prevail, even at the very gates of hell.
What am I supposed to do now?
What a king must do.
Watch out, Legion. Anduin is coming for you now. And besides the part of Charlemagne just lying there on the ground, no Legion forces or any of our troops that spotted it, besides that minor thing, I freaking love the cinematic. It has a very nice callback to Siege of Orgrimmar. There's Anduin reflecting on his father's life and the path that's before him, placing son and father at the Valley of Heroes, where some of the greatest heroes of the Alliance are honored. A very, very nice touch. King Varian has left some mighty big shoes to fill, but let's not forget that through most of his life, it was Anduin that was the voice of reason for the king. It doesn't always take a warrior to lead a kingdom, and yet there are times when you must be willing to fight. 8 months ago, Blizzard released some comics related to Legion, and at the time I thought that the Anduin, Son of the Wolf comic, that it was set much closer to the immediate defeat at the Broken Shore. Part of it was because Anduin mentioned his coronation, but it seems like that comic that it actually plays out after we take him to the Broken Shore. That would explain how he got his hands on Charlemagne, and also how he was able to stand up against the Dreadlord's words. He is the son of Varian, and his father changed him as much as he has changed the wolf. This does lead into the question as to where they're going to take Anduin next. In the past, it was always said that Anduin was awful at fighting in melee combat. His skills were more for the bow or the throwing daggers. Or of course, there was the affinity to the light and the powers connected to that. This doesn't mean that a future for Anduin as a paladin is entirely impossible. The line where he says that his father tried to shelter him from the war, that is very similar to Arthas as a young boy telling Varian that his father too tried to protect him, which is why his training hadn't really begun yet. Varian's father had also tried to protect his son, and he had failed. The realities of life, they have a way of intruding like that. So perhaps this will be the beginning for Anduin to embrace the warrior side of things, and eventually fulfill the prophecy as seen by Velen. Instead of the prince, an armored warrior stood before him, his plate, helm and breastplate shining with the essence of light itself. The warrior wielded a sword forged from the same material as the armor, held it aloft as he perched on an outcropping. Whether it was on another world or Azeroth, Velen couldn't quite tell. And suddenly, the dark sky above erupted with the combined chivalry of Azeroth's races. The Blood Elves, Orcs, Trolls, Tauren, and even the accursed undead and the scheming goblins rode flying mounts of every sort and description. They were armored and armed in magical weaponry, glowing with so much power that it hurts Velen's eyes to look at them. Besides the legions of the Horde, the ancient Night Elves charged with humans, dwarves, and gnomes, whose ancestors formed the original alliance, and the shape-changing Worgen were united with them. Velen's own Draenei bolstered the army, their ranks adorned in otherworldly medals and bearing crystalline maces and swords. The Alliance and Horde were not alone. Dragons swooped and soared in formation that made the sky resemble a giant, multicolored reptilian wing. They blanketed the horizon with their physical size and numbers, and when they roared a challenge, it shook not just the earth Velen stood on, but the universe as well. And yet, for all of this, the greatest shock to Velen's senses came as he saw those that flew just beyond the army of dragons. The Naru had taken the field, so many that Velen didn't understand how creation could contain them. The power of these beings of light filled Velen's heart with hope, swept away the lonely centuries, and left him in wonder that he could ever despair, that the dark, no matter how terrible, could ever truly reign. And then a shadow fell. It was vast and empty and swallowed all light that entered it. Velen knew it would be all-consuming until at last it would turn and devour itself, endlessly gnawing on nothing in the great dark beyond, removing all meaning from the universe, from the most heartbreaking sonata to the most arresting sunset. It was too terrible to see, to comprehend, and yet the army headed straight for it, and the light began to fade. Now, of course, a prophecy does not mean that it is certain. It could also be that Anduin remains a priest, who knows? But I thought that this questline, including the cinematic, was freaking awesome. It does suck that it's not available for the Horde. As far as I know, all they got this week was Khadgar's Turning quest, which, was not really amazing. You could say that at the start of Legion, the Horde already got an additional cinematic, with Vol'jin passing on leadership to Sylvanas. There are also rumors about an upcoming Vol'jin quest with his tusk, but if that's the case, then I don't recall it being data mined from the PTR or whatnot. And I also wonder, if that quest is truly a thing, then why wouldn't they release it on the same week? It's patch 5.3 all over again, only this time reversed. Would have been nice to at least make a scenario and give the Horde a chance to experience this as well, but what can you do? What the Horde did get last week was the short story about Nathanos Blightcaller and Banshee Queen Sylvanas Windrunner, which I'll link in the description down below if you want to read it for yourself. The story explains that Sylvanas, like her other two Windrunner sisters, she has a thing for humans. We already knew that she appointed Nathanos as the first and only human Ranger General, but in the story they were also flirting and touching and all the things that people do when they like each other. Well, not all the things that people do. Anyways, it then flashes forwards to Nathanos jumping down on a recent victim, being turned into an undead as the plague has spread across the lands of Lordaeron. Sylvanas, now undead herself, she shows up to recruit her champion back into her service as they're now able to set themselves free from the will of the Lich King. Another fast forward to more recent times where Nathanos is summoned for a special ritual. As all undead, decomposing is definitely a problem, but a beloved Valkyr have a solution. Once, Arthas forced the Valkyr to raise Death Knights for his army. That was a much more potent ritual than the one that they now use to transform fresh corpses into Forsaken. They can still use their powers to reshape Nathanos' body and make it stronger and more enduring. It's a difficult endeavor, one that they are reluctant to undertake, since without the Lich King's energies feeding them now, the Banshee Queen believes that it requires a portion of their own essence to succeed. That is why they can't do it for all the Forsaken, but since Sylvanas has a Banshee boner for a champion, Nathanos is chosen to undergo the ritual. As fuel for his new body, they captured his cousin, who has joined the Argent Crusade, which means that they actually give an explanation as to why Nathanos got a new model with Legion. After the ritual is done, he notices how his body is a lot stronger, how his voice is different, but he now also picks up the delicious smells of the corpses within the Undercity. This is something that he'll have to deal with, and for the briefest of moments, he also feels the touch of something foreign, of something unsettling. A sensation absent since the day that he had died, a weakness of mortality. He felt regrets for what they did to his cousin. This story gives a bit of insight to the Nathanos-Sylvanas relationship, and it adds a bit more depth to the love puppy that we quested with during Stormheim.
For the Dark Lady.
If you've read the short story, then by all means let me know what you think about it, cause I'm quite curious how it's received. Do you think that empowering her troops, like they did with Nathanos, or perhaps preventing the decaying of her troops is the reason why Sylvanas made the bargain with Helya? Let me know in the comments down below. Before the Storm is the latest Warcraft novel released, which takes place after our victory in Argus and the imprisonment of Sargeras. The Lord of the Legion was able to stab our world and do some massive damage to the planets. Azeroth is dying and bleeding a somewhat new substance called Azerite. That and the events with the Desolate Council. Those are the two major storylines told in the book, so let's begin with the Azerite. This stuff was first discovered by Gallywix, all the way back to the Goblin days of Kazan, all the way back to the Cataclysm. It turns out that Deathwing showing up or the Cataclysm, they might not actually been the reason for the volcano to go active and destroying their little island. It could have very well been the goblins digging so deep that they actually struck the blood of the world. They actually found Azerite. He placed it in his cane for safekeeping, and with recent events, the ore inside has changed color from red to gold again. Touching this stuff, it has some incredible effects on the people. Forget Kajamite or Kajakola, this is the real deal, as it can give you a feeling of being mighty. Thoughts will race through your brain, not simply calculating, cunning or clever thoughts, but shining, frighteningly brilliant ones. Innovative, creative, it can heal the soul, it can destroy civilizations. This stuff is a power unlike any they've ever experienced. And like Sylvanas said,
this will change everything.
Those that touch it, they all have a similar experience to its properties. Although it's an unknown and new substance for the moment, the potential of it is instantly clear. There was speculation that it might also have some mind-controlling or mind-altering abilities, which might be something that they'll still play around with, but in the book, it doesn't really seem to be a thing. Instead, it comes down to the individual on how they could utilize it. Sylvanas, for example, she saw herself no longer as the Dark Lady or even a queen. She was a goddess of destruction and creation, and she was stunned that she had never understood how deeply those two were intertwined. Armies, cities, entire cultures. She could raise them and fell them. Stormwind would be among the first, yielding its people to swell the numbers of her own. She could deal death on a scale that... yeah, all in all, she wants to weaponize it. Anduin has strategies racing through his head, each of them sound and successful, each of them a shift in comprehension and ensuring a lasting peace that benefited every being on Azeroth. He felt like he could not only climb mountains, he could move them. He could end war, channel the light into every dark corner. He was exultant and also perfectly, wholly calm and completely certain as to how to channel this rushing river. No, not a river, a tsunami of energy and power. Not even the light affected him as this did. The sensation was similar, but less spiritual, more physical, and more alarming. What could be done with this? How many could it heal? How many could it strengthen, soothe, invigorate, or inspire? How many could it kill? The thought was a gut punch, and he felt the elation inspired by the gemstone retreats. Yeah, Anduin wants to use it to bring peace and keep others safe. There are those amongst the Alliance that want to use it in an offensive manner, like Rogers for example, but Anduin, he's pretty clear about his intentions, and the rest follow his lead. Throughout the story, we read about a goblin-gnome couple. Yep, goblin-gnome love that is now a confirmed thing, and they work on ways on how to use Azerites, like armor, antidotes, and of course weapons. In the end, Safranet, Vivers and Grisik, they don't exactly want to hand over the work to the Horde, as they know what's going to happen to the labor of love, and they rather take the chances with the Alliance. They don't really get a choice though, as during their escape, they get captured. They're tied to a bomb and then it explodes, but it doesn't exactly say if they blow up or not, so maybe there'll be something that will show up in the next expansion. Yet Azerite, that is the lifeblood of this world, her essence, and Magni Bronzebeard, he can hear her cries of agony. The world is dying, and he doesn't just let the Alliance and Horde know. This is a problem that affects all life on the planet, and he goes around making sure that everyone's priorities are in order.
The storm's gathering, hero. If we don't find a way to heal Azeroth, nothing else is gonna matter.
While speaking with the Alliance, they're quickly on board, and they're going to send out the Explorers League, the Cenarian Circle, and the Earthen Ring to Silithus. The Horde is asked to get the goblins out of there, as they're just making bad things worse, and if they're not going to stop, we might need to find a new world to call home. Sylvanas isn't really too happy with the King of Diamonds showing up, but she does let Bane lead the response to heal Azeroth, after telling him to stop communicating with Anduin Wrynn, as that has still been a thing. Magni then leaves them behind to next inform the Centaur and Desolates of what is going on. Like I said, he is going around and warning everyone. So that's the situation with Azerite. It's a new powerful substance that's going to change everything. It's going to change the war, it's going to change the balance of power. The next big thing, that is the Desolate Council, an organization that slowly formed once the Dark Lady became the war chief. While other members of the Horde, they criticize her for not showing the other races enough attention. Her own people, the Forsaken, they say that she'd be giving them too much, and avoided power has developed within the Undercity. They're not another Putris or anything. They have no intention of seizing power from the Dark Lady. They just make sure that there's a governing body to tend to the population's needs. But since the Forsaken now have a free will, something even shown during their starting experience, as they have the choice to join the Forsaken or not, it also gives them a choice to disagree with the Banshee Queen's views. She has personally seen her hell, and she wants to stay alive forever, but some have begun to wonder if they were even meant to do so. How much should they exactly do? How far should they go just to keep existing? That's a question arising among some of the Forsaken, as well as emotions and memories to the days amongst the living. This is set up with Anduin's caretaker, Will Benton, dying, who in his final moments, he can't see his beloved wife Elsie waiting for him. If she had died, she would be waiting, and if she had survived, surely she would have found a way back to him. His last request to Anduin is to tell her that he always loved only her. If you see her, tell her I'll wait for her. As luck would have it, Elsie is actually the leader of the Desolate Council, and there are more amongst the Forsaken that would love to see their living family again. Now you might remember that when the Forsaken asked to join the Alliance, the messengers, they never made it back, but times definitely have changed. Years have passed now, and there's a new leadership. Not only that, we also saw Alonsus Fowl make a return in Legion, the one responsible for the creation of the Paladins in the Alliance. He came back as an undead priest, and he worked with priests from all around the world to fight against the Legion.
Forgive the secrecy. Old habits die hard. I am Alonsus Fowl. At times, I have been a leader of a church, a mindless minion of the Scourge, and a commander in a secret war. But I have always been a priest first.
More Forsaken were accepted as just priests, comrades in arms against the might of the Legion. If they could do it on a small scale amongst the priest order hall within Netherlight Temple, is there then the potential for a reunion between the living and the undead? The spark of an idea, the seed of change was there, and it would only take a few good people with good intentions to make it so. Now I'd highly recommend to actually pick up the book and read how all of this is built up, because I would never be able to retell it and do it justice. It's not exactly just an idea popping up and yeah, let's go, let's have the Forsaken and humans reunite. They definitely take the proper time for it, there's planning and examples that it could work. Like Turellian, he has been brilliantly used, as he was there during the days that Alonsus was still alive. He was one of the first paladins of the Order of the Silver Hand. Turellian, the one so devoted to the light, and a member of the story when the undead was just seen as shadow and pure evil, he has been used to make a change. When Anduin sets up a meeting with Turellian and Alonsus, the paladin, he first brims with rage. He sees Alonsus as nothing but a being that has stolen his form to parade around with, wearing him as if he were a suit of clothing. The undead in his eyes are unholy, so Alonsus, he walks up to him, arms spread, and he asks him to look for the light within. You will find it, and if you do not, then I do beg of you to strike me down, for I would not wish to exist as a broken corpse that the light has abandoned. And so, the High Exarch does, and he does find the light. He finds his old friend again. His arrogance was blinding him to what was clear all along, had he looked with the right eyes. There is more to the Forsaken than just seeing them as dark, unholy creatures, but it's definitely going to take some time for that mindset to change. At first, they asked around to find out who's even willing to meet up with their former loved ones and friends. Same is done on the Forsaken side within the Desolate Council. And of course, there are a lot of negotiations on how this is going to go down, since the two sides, they're not exactly friends with each other. Not to mention that Sylvanas definitely has quite a few reservations when it comes to all of this. She cares about the Forsaken, and this will only lead to pain for her people. They cannot be human, and to dangle this temptation of reunion with loved ones, it will result in them growing discontented with who they really are, discontented with the Forsaken. They will deteriorate to heartbroken shells, wanting something that they can never have. But Nathanos, he lets her know that she could actually use this to her advantage. Many Forsaken wish for their next death to be their last death. They do not wish to keep existing like Sylvanas does, and one reason commonly cited is that they want to be with those that they loved while they lived. If she would authorize this experience, this reconnection with the people they loved in life, and present it to them as something that she has generously granted them, perhaps they will be more amenable to accepting her solution, finding ways to keep the Forsaken as a race from going extinct. It's only going to be for a single day. Give them this hope, this moment with people that they thought they'd never see again. Then she holds the power to their happiness, at least in this aspect. Or they might decide that they hate the living and be all the more devoted to the Dark Lady. Either way, Sylvanas would win. Like I said, if you really want all those details on how this idea sparked to life, definitely pick up the book. Now, as planned, the meeting took place, and while some humans, despite agreeing to come to this meeting, they still turned away at the last moment and crushed the Forsaken that showed up, others, they definitely had a very touching reunion. So much so that they did not want the day to end at all. One of them approached the priest, Kalia Menethil, sister to Arthas Menethil, who like Alonsus also showed up again in Legion.
Let us get to introduce you to Kalia Menethil. Yes, that Menethil. She has been a great help these past few years. I'd like her to assist you helping the helpless, conveying your word to the world. All that.
We find out that she had secretly fallen in love with a footman. She got married and she even had a child. But all of that was before Arthas and the Scourge. She doesn't remember much of that period, besides lying in a ditch while the Scourge passed over her. Eventually, she was able to make her way to South Shore, and there she reunited with her little family. For a time, they were happy. No one recognized her, since all assumed that she was dead. But then, the Blight came. They ran, but in the crowds they were separated. While she was saved and taken past the limits of the town, she never found her family again, and she was hoping that they might have become Forsaken, that word of them might reach her at this meeting. That would not be the case. Instead, she was recognized for who she truly was, and they asked her to be there for them, be there for the Forsaken that did not want to go back home. This was actually an idea that they discussed earlier between Anduin and Kalia. The question was she still the rightful heir to Lordaeron? Would she want Stormwind to wage war against the Horde and reclaim her throne? Would a war even be worth it? But Kalia, she said that those who currently inhabit Lordaeron live there in life. The Forsaken are the true heirs. It belongs to them now, and the best that she can do for those whom she would have ruled is exactly what she already was doing, being a priest and healing. Yet like I said, some of the Forsaken did not want this day to end, and despite all the rules set up before this meeting, they asked Kalia to be there for them, and they started walking towards Stormguard Keep, away from the Banshee Queen. there defecting, Sylvanas realized, and all hell broke loose. The Rangers with her, they started shooting down those that dared to betray her, but she was also very smart about it. They made sure to only kill her own Forsaken, since that way she would be the one to start the Alliance Horde war and still keep up her end of the bargain when it came to this meeting. Sadly, not all of the Forsaken, not all of the Desolate Council were willing to abandon their queen, not even for Kalia. They wanted to come home and started running at the signal. They started running back, but they were shot all the same. Nathanos was actually a little bit shocked by that, but Sylvanas, she did not know if those that came back did so out of fear. How tempted were they until that point, until the signal was given? No, she could not take the risk. The only Desolate Council members that she trusted, they were the ones who returned to her early on, broken and bitter, truly desolate. All the others, she cannot allow that sentiment, that hope to grow. It's an infection ready to spread, and she has to cut it out. She also knew that this wasn't Anduin's doing. He wasn't that stupid. No. This was on the head of that Kalia girl, and she was going to pay. The Banshee Queen herself fired the arrow that took Kalia's life, despite Anduin rushing the field and trying to save her. He is going to bring her body back to Netherlight Temple, though, so the War Chief and the Boy King, they have a little stare down. He knows that she doesn't want a war yet, otherwise they wouldn't be talking, but he has the right to declare it, as she just broke the rules and killed one of his people. But Kalia wasn't one of his though. She was a citizen of Lordaeron, and he was the one who brought a usurper onto the field. It's the Banshee Queen who would be well in her rights to consider that a hostile action. But this stand down, it ends with words, as Sylvanas is not quite ready for her war. Anduin then takes Kalia's body back to Netherlight Temple, where the Naru Sara, Alonsus, and the Order is waiting. Kalia would come to me when the dreams of what was past were too painful to endure. I cautioned her to have patience. There were things she had to do before the dreams would cease. Things she must understand. People who would need her help. And I assured her of this seemingly strange truth, that sometimes the most beautiful and important gifts come wrapped in pain and blood. There will be no more of those battles for her now. Kalia Menethil will be freed from the pains of the living, from the nightmares that once wrenched her heart. She understood that those on that field were her people, and she accepted that responsibility by giving her life to try to save them. Not human, as they were when she was young, but forsaken, as they were in that moment. Light and dark, forsaken priests and human priests. Together you shall bring her back as the light, and she herself would have her be. And that's exactly what happens. Alonso and Anduin, they each take one of Kalia's small pale hands, and a torrent of light starts spilling out. Anduin usually experienced the light's power flowing through him like a river, but now it seemed like a whole ocean was utilizing him as a vessel. The light lined him in its warm hue, and it chased around the still yet completely intact body of the Queen of Lordaeron and whirled about the Forsaken Archbishop. Anduin felt it swell like a wave, then crashed and break, emptying him, but not depleting him, and the cold hand in his squeezed. Kalia is resurrected, her eyes glowing a soft, gentle white, not the eerie yellow hue of Forsaken. She was dead, but she lived. She was no mindless undead, but she was not Forsaken either. She'd been raised by a human and a Forsaken, both using the power of the light, bathed in the radiance of a Naru. Now, despite nearly causing a war, it was never her intention of doing so. She went to the meeting not to become a usurper, but when the Forsaken asked her to stand with them, she had a choice. She could support them and reveal who she was and get them and the others to safety, or disavow them and get them killed. She was never taught how to rule, because no one expected her to. She never formally studied politics or strategy, so when she went out there, she just followed her heart and nearly got everybody killed. The book then ends with Gen and Anduin having a discussion of the events, even someone like Gen surprisingly open to the idea of reuniting with the Forsaken, and reassuring Anduin that no one could have foreseen how poorly Sylvanas could deal with anything that wasn't complete obedience. Despite the failure here today, Anduin will never stop hoping for peace, and never stop believing that people can change. But he does realize that he's been like a farmer, expected to harvest crops from a poisoned field. It's simply not possible. People can change, but some people will never desire to do so. Sylvanas Windrunner is one of those. He took a deep breath. Sorrow and grim resolve made him look older. Gen had seen similar expressions on the face of those who'd been tasked with a heartbreaking duty. When the boy spoke, Gen was glad of the words, but saddened by his need to say them. I believe said Anduin Lane Rin, that Sylvanas Windrunner is well and truly lost. And that is where the story of Before the Storm ends, leaving us with Kalia Menethil, I guess a holy undead now, weaponized Azerites, as well as other utilities for the new substance. The world needed to rally with Magni Bronzebeard in order to heal the planet. Anduin and Sylvanas trying to see if they can get a small scale of peace going, and a war that she isn't ready for quite yet. Anduin Rin, the boy who once led Garrosh Hellscream into the Veil of Eternal Blossoms. He says that he believes she is truly lost and gone when someone like Anduin gives up hope. That's really far down, man.
I find your faith inspiring, little one. But I wonder if you have ever met our war chief.
Here are a couple of lore details that I thought were interesting to mention. Being crushed by the Divine Bell, that has had an interesting effect on Anduin Rin. Someone in the comments actually called it his holy spider sense. Basically, his bones ache whenever he's on the wrong path, when he was being cruel or thoughtless or courting danger. Quite an interesting effect. Then Greymane, he is pressuring Anduin in selecting an heir for the throne, while he has been forcefully rebuked for taking the assignment into Stormwind much further than Anduin had ordered. The relationship between Sylvanas and Nathanos that has been touched upon, although she has left behind most warmer emotions the moment that she is risen from the dead as a Banshee, anger somehow had retained its heat. But she felt it subside to embers now. She seldom stayed angry for long, and Nathanos Meris, known now as the Blightcaller. She wanted to reach for his hand, but contented herself with smiling benevolently. So yeah, the emotional feelings between Nathanos and Sylvanas, also something touched upon in his short story. That's definitely still something that they're working with, although I do wonder what that whole emote that Sylvanas does in Battle for Azeroth towards Nathanos, I wonder what that is all about, but maybe that will something explained later. Magni Bronzebeard, besides warning the world, he takes a moment to visit his grandkid Dagran, while Jaina, she visits Kalecgos and Dalaran once again. There's still a lot of love between them. But Jaina, she isn't quite done with searching where she belongs. She knows what she's against. She knows what angers her and where her hate is pointed towards. She knows what she doesn't want, but she doesn't know what calms her or what she loves or what she does want. As we see in the comic that they released, the journey takes her to Kaltiris and will play out in Battle for Azeroth. Valera Sanguinar is still loyal to House Rin and actually helps out with secret communications, the ones that some might see as betrayal to the Horde, but it did allow a different voice to rise up after the events on the Broken Shore. From the Alliance point of view, it seemed like a betrayal, but the Horde has a different version, and on the field of the meeting, Anduin actually asks Sylvanas, like, did you betray my father? She replies by saying, Varian Rin's destiny was set in stone, little lion. The Legion's numbers would have seen to that, whatever choice I made that day. Anduin believes her, and it's not unreasonable to suppose that remaining there on the Broken Shore would have doomed them and the Alliance. Anduin has gotten a lot better with wielding the sword, as we see in Battle for Azeroth. In the past, he was always set to suck at it. He was alright with throwing dagger or a bow, and of course, a very strong affinity to the light. But a fighter like his father, he was not. He still isn't really. But after the events in the Shattering, after his friend Eren died, he began training in earnest. He wanted to become, if not a superior swordsman, a good one at least. And it appears that after a slow start, very similar to Arthas, he can now wield a weapon good enough to hold his own. I was actually planning to end this video with a little opinion piece, give my opinion on the story as we know it so far, but I think I'll save that for a separate video as I've been going on for long enough. All in all, I think a very short opinion would be that I wished they gave more development time to other subjects rather than just the Forsaken storyline that we see in Before the Storm. I really like that they try to give a different spin to established lore, and they definitely give it time to develop. Like I mentioned in my review, you look at the concept of Forsaken and human reuniting, and at first you're like, really? Is that gonna happen? But over time, with the examples that they use, with the slow but surely build up, you actually start to root for it, and you hope that it actually works out. This book reminded me a lot of War Crimes in that way. There was also the whole build-up of Garrosh potentially maybe, just maybe be better than what he was, and that kind of fell flat on its face, especially with, you know, the whole Wars of Draenor. So I kind of wonder what this story is supposed to build up. We have Sylvanas weaponizing Azerite. We have Anduin being aware of the fear of Azerite and, you know, trying to defend the world against it. We have Kalia as a holy undead for some reason. And of course, we have the messed up meeting between Forsaken and the humans. That's maybe more to profile Sylvanas, and I don't know. Like I said, I'll save my opinion for a specific video where I can actually write down all my thoughts and give it a proper thing. So yeah, for now though, before I start rambling, thank you very much for watching, everybody. Hello everyone! At the end of Legion, we were able to defeat Argus, and with the help of the Pantheon, we imprisoned the Dark Titan Sargeras. In his final moments, the Lord of the Legion penetrated the world with his swords, not delivering a death blow, but doing some serious damage to the planet. Azeroth is wounded, and her speaker, Mac the Bronzebeard, he goes around warning the world that we need to focus our efforts on healing her, or we might have to start looking for a new planet to live on. Now wounded, she's bleeding a material called Azerites, which is a completely new discovery for most people, except for just the Gallywix, whose people, they'd found it all the way back on their island of Kazan. Digging so deep, it might have actually caused the destruction of the little island, but all the same, he presents the new material to his war chief, and upon touching it, she says,
This will change everything.
I told you!
This new substance is the most powerful thing they've ever held. It gives you incredibly smart thoughts, strategies will race through your mind, and the Dark Lady, she saw herself no longer as a Dark Lady or even a queen. She was a goddess of destruction and creation, and she was stunned that she'd never understood how deeply those two were intertwined. Armies, cities, entire cultures. She could raise them, and she could fell them. Stormwind would be among the first, yielding his people to swell the numbers of her own. She could deal death on a scale that... yeah, her dream of staying alive forever, of never going back to the hell that she witnessed. That has her quickly weaponized as, right? Well, Gallywix, he has his people mind this stuff.
Nothing good has ever come out of Silithus.
The Alliance finds out about the operations, and while touching it, it gives Anduin a similar feeling of power and strategy. His mind races to how many it could heal, how many could it strengthen, soothe, invigorate and inspire. Yet, how many could it kill? And the thought was a gut punch. There are definitely those amongst the Alliance that would love to use Azerite in an offensive matter, people like Rogers and Greymane. But Anduin, he's pretty clear about his intentions, and the rest follow his lead. All this information is from the novel Before the Storm, and I'll link to a video I've done at the end if you want more details. Now the tale ends with a meeting between Forsaken and humans. A meeting that does not end too well, yet no war was started between the Alliance or the Horde. That war begins with this campaign, where the Horde troops are summoned by the War Chief to the Undercity. As SI-7 operatives, they're crawling through Orgrimmar.
Though our long war against the Legion has ended, the Horde cannot afford a moment of respite. Meet me in my chambers in the Undercity, where we can discuss our next move, discreetly.
Instead of focusing our efforts on Silithus, the Bench Queen lets us know that that is exactly what she wanted the Alliance to believe. Instead, we're going to focus on Teldrassil, the home of the Night Elves. Azerite, it has changed the balance of power across all of Azeroth. Though we do not yet fully understand its potential, it is clear that this substance has vast destructive capabilities. She wonders, what will war look like in 20 years, in 100? How can the Horde hope to defend its borders if the Alliance controls the flow of Azerite? It's uncertain. But what is certain is that the Alliance will use Darnassus as a safe harbor for funneling Azerite into the Eastern Kingdoms. Anduin Wrynn will build powerful new weapons, and sooner or later he will turn them upon our homelands. First, he will strike at the Undercity, and then Silvermoon. Then his gaze will fall upon all of Kalimdor. For the sake of the Horde's future, we must be the first to act. By occupying Darnassus, we will be the ones to control the flow of Azerite and ensure that it cannot be used against us. The Alliance would not dare attack its own city for fear of harming civilians. With a single stroke, we will guarantee generations of peace. The best defense is a good offense, and we all know how much of a warmonger Anduin Wrynn is. Attacking them before they attack us, that is the only way to secure a safe future with someone like him as High King. It's High Overlord Varrock Saurfang that leads an army towards Silithus. By now, they've reached the Northern Barrens, where we meet up with him, and we let him know that the preparations are complete. It's time to capture World 3. Meanwhile, on the Alliance side, we have King Anduin Wrynn, who's summoning the troops with a heavy heart.
Though the Legion has fallen, a new threat rises. Disturbing messages are arriving from our operatives in Orgrimmar. Join me at Stormwind Keep to discuss the matter further.
Sylvanas' plans of misinforming the enemy faction, that has definitely worked, as they believe that an army is marching on Silithus to claim the Azerites. Heroes of the Horde and Alliance, they fought side by side during the Argus campaign. Order halls, class members, they've been brought together to stand against the threat of the Legion. To think that Sylvanas is ready to cast the unity aside. Yet Matthias Shaw, leader of the SI-7, he shows up with disturbing news. Turns out that our reports were wrong. The Horde has diverted and are marching into Ashenvale. The Night Elves have already sent out the forces towards Silithus to support the war efforts. They must be halfway by now, and the only Kaldorei defenders left, that are the Darnassian City Guard. They won't last long against an army, so we ride out to meet with our commander, the Laren Summermoon, to buy as much time as we can until the fleet comes back home.
Soldiers of the Horde, ready your blades! Today, we march on the Kaldorei!
The Horde army moves into Ashenvale, while we meet up with Lorash, a rogue that's going to help us sack Astranar. Hundreds of them have already attacked Kaldorei outposts across Ashenvale. On his signal, they will begin the next phase of this war, sowing chaos.
First, let me signal the others to begin their assault. This fire burns with purple smoke. They should see it rise above the trees soon. After you, champion. You mark the safe targets. I'll bring them down.
Our targets are the guards in the city, with a choice of not actually harming the civilians. Lorash, he doesn't care either way. He is a bit disturbed about killing a man in his sleep, but he also compliments us for our style and is worried about alerting the guards. Being offered a choice. That's very nice. Yet on the Alliance side, we find out that either choice, it doesn't really matter. Our forces, they came in later and did the dirty work for us, as everybody's dead.
The bodies. So many bodies. We tried to set a trap for the Horde. It failed. We could not stop them. Our outposts were taken by surprise. They fell one by one. The guards were poisoned. And the civilians, not even they were spared. I only hope that some managed to flee before. Forgive me, friend. Who did you say you were? Are you the one Malfurion spoke of? There are more wisps than I can count. The loss of life. Merciful Illume, please bless the fallen.
Anduin or Shaw, they were the ones sending us to help her, but apparently Malfurion, he's also aware of this, as he asked us if he's the one who sent us. Either way, we need to keep in mind that with Battle for Azeroth Collector's Edition, we're also going to get 2 short stories. Both of them, they take place around the same time period, but both of them are told from either faction's point of view. It's uncertain when exactly the events take place, but if I had to make a guess, I'd say somewhere around this time. If you're not ordering the Collector's Edition, but you do really enjoy the storyline, don't worry, they will be available online for free. Now in the preview, on the Alliance side, we have Elegy, in which we read about the Laren and her troops being attacked by Horde forces, and they discovered the ruse. They discovered that the Horde is not actually on the move to Silithus. A messenger is then sent to Malfurion, while another, he's sent out to check how far the Horde has already moved in. It's just a tiny preview, so hopefully more details will become available. While on the Horde side, that story is called A Good War, which has Saurfang in Astranar. Malfurion Stormrage shows up, to which the orc challenges him to Makura. Knowing that he doesn't stand a chance against the Archdruids, the rest of the troops, they make their escape while their duel takes place. A duel interrupted by Sylvanas, who saves Saurfang's life. That's all we really have at the moment, and I can't wait for the full version to be released. But it makes sense for this to take place at this point, to take place while we're still at Astranar. Details unclear, but what is pretty certain is that Astranar falls to the Horde, to which they move on to the already established outpost of Zormgar. We make sure that they're ready to accommodate the might of the Horde, while back in Astranar, the Laren, she wants to honor the dead and take care of the butchers that still skulk the city.
Do you hear the screams?
We must defeat the Horde and their vile war chief, though it might cost us that which we hold most dear. The forest stirs as Malfurion summons the wisps, like he did in days past during Warcraft 3, to take care of the Demon Lord Archimonde. This time, he calls upon the ancestors to form a protective wall and halt the Horde's advance.
You will come no further, Banshee Queen.
Soldiers, no! Do not rush the... fools! At least now we know how dangerous the wisps can be.
You may pass through the wall, hero. The wisps will not harm you.
Sylvanas has to deal with an ambush from Ashenvale huntresses, and with most of her troops demolished by the wall, she retreats to Zormgar outposts.
Malfurion, Horde forces have gathered at the Zormgar outpost.
The Banshee Queen seeks to capture the World Tree. Dalaran, travel to our outposts. Gather every soldier you can find and bring them here.
And you, Shando?
Sylvanas seeks to engage me, and I plan to give her what she wants. Word has been sent to our fleet. Elune willing, they will soon return.
As you command.
The ancients called to him, and we must protect him at all cost. The Druids of the Claw, they rallied for battle, while the Blackwood Furbolgs, they've been driven to madness by the Horde's invasion. If left to the madness, they could strike us from behind, while our forces engage the Hordes. It pains them to do so, but we must put the creatures out of their misery. Meanwhile, back at Zormgar Outpost, we have Sylvanas, Sourfang and Nathanos, who are trying to figure out what to do about the wall.
A wall of wisps? Surely it is nothing our Dark Rangers and a few demolishers cannot overcome, my lady.
The scouting party I led to Malfurion underestimated the wisps, and they paid the price for doing so. We cannot destroy the wisps, not in numbers enough to matter, but we may be able to disperse them.
Interesting. The wisps respond to Malfurion's call. But what if more of the forest were to cry out for help?
Precisely what I was thinking. Champion, would you be so kind as to test our theory?
Ancient magic, the spirits of the ancestors. It's nothing against a bit of solid goblin ingenuity, as we hop into a plane and we bombard the crap out of the wisps and the trees.
It seems the wisps are susceptible to distraction. We will exploit this weakness to get past them. Sawfang, take a squad into Felwood. Seek a path over the mountain into Darkshore, but leave the siege weapons under my command. We will squeeze Malfurion from both sides.
War Chief, there is no safe passage through Felwood.
Find one or make one. Time is a luxury we do not possess.
No many smugglers, blight collar.
I beg your pardon?
I am not naive. There is little chance that Everlook receives all its cargo through legitimate means. Someone is using a hidden route through Felwood.
Most smugglers would prefer to avoid the attention of the High Overlord. But I believe we can locate one who can be persuaded to assist us.
Then it is decided. Sawfang, Nathanos, you will leave at once.
While Sourfang and Nathanos, they go on their own adventures through Felwood. We meet up with the Banshee Queen, who uses her dark powers to funnel through a small portion of her forces.
We pass through the wall on my command. Brace yourselves! Pass through the wall, quickly! I cannot hold it much longer! Once a breach has been made, the pain is bearable. Just give me a moment.
The wall will be a problem for a while, halting the majority of the Horde forces. But for now, we have enough to push through. Enough to take the Master's Glaive from those savage elves. Malfurion must be gathering his forces, so we press on through the forest, the sacred forest of the elves, both a protective and offensive measure for their land. Sentry owls are hidden amongst the trees, spying on our every movement, so we shut the eyes of the forest, while the frenzied Furbolg, they cannot be allowed to stand in our way. With the eyes shut, only one thing remains. We need to take care of the ears. The ancients, they can feel the vibrations of our footsteps and report our every move to Malfurion. Time to defeat the burning ancient at the grove, where the Archdruid finally shows up.
Sylvanas, your foul deeds desecrate this sacred place. Undo Falador!
Malfurion, how gracious of you to join us. Who would have guessed that you would come to protect your precious trees?
Be gone, witch!
No! My eyes! It burns. Where did you fly away to, little bird?
The crow has flown, but we've moved enough of our troops to the Darkshore to establish a foothold. The local Furbolg and the Blackwood Den, they will need to be slaughtered though, while the Horde banners, they will rally the troops. But don't worry about it, once we've conquered our Nassus, the elders of the Blackwood tribe, they will be thanking us for murdering them. I mean, restoring peace to the Den. While the rest of our army sets up camp, the Dark Lady's attention is drawn by something interesting at Nashville.
Sappers, gather your gear and follow me. Bring every shredder we have.
By the time that the Laren and the Alliance reaches the grove, there's a monster shredder that's trying to desecrate it, so we destroy it before the Ancients of the Forest are taken out, and it's Onu that points us towards the Blackwood Den. The Ancients of the Forest are all connected to one another, and they sense the disturbance, the thundering clamor of war. Soon, their brethren will answer in kind, for nothing shall disrupt the balance of nature. Before that moment, it falls to us to take care of business, and at the den, we can see the remaining Furbolg guarded by the Horde. Their camp has already been built, but it doesn't mean that we can't do a bit of damage by sabotaging their demolishers, while the Elder Furbolg, they're escorted to a safer place. It's Onu that senses which interested the Dark Lady so much, but the powerful force that he's sensing at Nashville, it's actually hurting him. We discover that a massive deposit of Azerite, that is the source of his pain. The Horde is already hard at work gathering it, despite Sylvanas, who says,
Azerite. With this in our grasp, all who dare to oppose the Horde will fall. Proceed with caution, champion. It seems the Alliance has beaten us to it. That ship must have come from Darnassus, which means I have a crow to hunt.
Bit of a time mix-up here, unless one side maybe wiped out the other and their leaders are unaware. Either way, both sides go in and kick the other faction's booty, while also collecting the Azerites. Malfurion and his forces hold the line at Wildbend River, yet we do not stand alone. The Ancients have answered the call, and on their branches we do some massive damage to the Horde. Yet Sylvanas and the Goblins, they've been working hard at weaponizing Azerites, and from the sky they unleash its deadly potential upon the Alliance. Both sides acknowledge that this battle is a stalemate, for every enemy that they slay, to replace them on the battlefield.
Wildbend River is locked in a stalemate, and Malfurion knows it. We must stay the course for now. I will continue leading our soldiers through the wall while we await word from Saurfang. In the meantime, we will do all that we can to keep the Kaldorei under pressure. We shall not afford them the luxury of a peaceful night's rest. This is war.
The Banshee Queen seems to have forgotten that she's actually fighting Night Elves. Well, Malfurion, he actually believes that they're too few in number to stand toe-to-toe. They must fall back and regroup in Darnassus. If we hope to push the Horde out of their lands, we must call upon all the strength that the people have to offer. The Druids, the Priestesses, the Sentinels, all are called to arms to defend their land against the encroaching Horde. Only together can we hope to end the stalemate at the Wildbend River, while even the fleet that was en route to Silithus, that makes its return.
Our fleet has returned from Silithus. Elune be praised. Their might is sorely needed. King Anduin will send his soldiers to aid us. We must hold our ground until they arrive. Your deeds will not be forgotten by the Kaldorei, hero. The aid you lend in these dark times could make all the difference.
May our will be stronger than their machines of war.
A war is not won or lost in a single battle. Our day will come.
And while we wait for our forces to prepare, we spend our time fighting each other in Darkshore. World Quest, they recruit heroes to aid with fighting the enemy, cleaning up some Azerite, continue the fight, with Night Elves proclaiming that they don't even want to fight. Some time passes until...
For the Horde!
Saurfang, it's about time. Look around you, hero. What a lovely sight. The wisps are scattering. One by one, the wall comes crashing down. Now is the time. The World Tree is ours for the taking. Find Saurfang. We shall finish this once and for all.
For the Horde!
That sound. Could it be? Shondo, the Horde is approaching from the north.
The north? How did they... Oh... They scaled the mountains of Felwood. Of course. The wisps. They're growing disoriented. The wall is failing.
Horde forces are advancing upon Lordanel. Champion, to me!
It's Lordanel, where our next fight takes place. And honestly, the events here, they can take place either way. Either the Horde is first, or the Alliance is first, or vice versa. Or maybe even at the same time. They're very interminglable. On the Horde side, we have Saurfang, who made his way across the mountains and is ready to take Lordanel. This is all that stands in our way before we can capture Darnassus and reclaim Kalimdor. We're told to rout the defenders, but we will not slay innocents. If they do not raise arms against us, we're going to spare them. We're going to capture the civilians, question them, and then release them. Kinda makes you wonder what would happen if a civilian doesn't want to talk. Well, Karana Briarbow and Ariel Staggart, they're the commanders in the area. Without their leadership, this force will crumble, so we take their lives with honor. The Alliance, they do pretty much the same. They kill the Horde invaders, they slay 2 of the Horde's strongest warriors, Gormak Exfall and Ragash Bloodwish. They have led a charge to try and capture our fleet, but we rescue as many civilians as we can. Yet despite our best efforts, the Horde is relentless and Lordanel is overrun. Securely in the Horde's hands, Saurfang wonders why they haven't seen Malfurion on the battlefield. He would never let Lordanel fall without a fight, so he must have gone after the Banshee Queen. In the forest, we find the two locked in battle.
The war chief faces storm rage alone. I must... Saurfang?
An audience. Perfect. Stay still, Alliance dog. Watch me strike down one of your greatest heroes.
A dishonorable blow. I regret it.
Regret nothing. You did well.
It was not my place to interfere.
My victory was inevitable. He was merely wasting my time. Finish him and be done with it. Take a moment if you like. Then take his head. Meet me at the World Tree.
You have led your horde in service of death. You will regret this day.
Malfurion, no! You did not kill him, Orc. Why?
I struck without honor. I did not deserve to end him.
This entire war is without honor. How dare you spill so much innocent blood for nothing?
Not for nothing. We spill blood so that the Horde will endure.
Because you spared Malfurion, I will offer you a choice. Attempt to stop me from taking him away and die, or remain there kneeling in the dirt and live.
You have a choice as well. Take him to Darnassus and both of you will fall when we conquer it. Or flee somewhere far from here, so that you both survive. Come, champion. We must follow our war chief to victory.
This war is lost. Teldrassil will soon fall. Take my hippogriff to Darnassus. Ensure that the Horde's occupation is as tolerable as it can be. King Anduin gave me a hearthstone back to Stormwind. There I will tend my love's wounds and help my people find respite from this madness.
Despite her prey, her target being on the floor and at her mercy, Sylvanas decides to walk away and let Saurfang finish the job. He doesn't, and instead Tyrande takes her husband away, leaving behind their people. Instead of trying to fight, rally or find a different plan, she abandons the battlefield and tells the champion to make the occupation of Teldrassil as pleasant as possible. Back at the war chief, we find a whole bunch of dead elves on the ground and Captain Delaran Summermoon kneeling in front of her. We tell our war chief that we are ready.
Secure the beach. Prepare to invade the tree.
Why? Why? You've already won. Only innocents remain in the tree.
This is war.
No. This is hatred. Rage. Windrunner. You were defender of your people. Do you not remember?
I remember. A fool. Take her! Run! Now, you understand. Ah, don't grieve. You'll soon join your loved ones.
I grieve for you. You've made life your enemy. And that is a war you'll never win. You can kill us, but you cannot kill hope.
Can't I? Burn it. Burn it!
Sylvanas Windrunner leads the Horde to victory, but a chance encounter, it causes her to make a decision that forever changed the course of history on Azeroth. She did not come here with the intention to burn the tree, but the words of the Laren, they change her mind. Some interpret that as the realization that even if they would capture Teldrassil, or even if they take out Malfurion, it would not be enough to crush the hope of the Alliance. She would have to take it further, and so it is that she gives the order to burn down the World Tree.
When I sent you on this mission, I did not foresee this outcome. Our attack was meant to end a war before it began. To capture an enemy's home and annihilate their leaders in one stroke. To inflict a wound that would bleed the Alliance dry. We have only partially succeeded. The Alliance will retaliate. They will come for us. For me, for you. But they are bleeding. Their anger will prove a weakness, not a strength, in the war to come. Rest while you can. Prepare for the battles ahead. I will have need of you.
As a reward, Horde players are given a worn-torn Reigns of the Undercity Plague bet. A bet that's apparently from the future, as it has a rather interesting Mount Journal description. Meanwhile, the Alliance goes back to Darnassus in an attempt to make the occupation as tolerable as possible, but that's made rather difficult with the tree being on fire. Ballista Starbreeze, the same Starbreeze from the Scythe of Elune. She's looking for her child Ishala, but there are more citizens that are trapped by the flames. Mia Greymane, Queen of Gilneas. She wants us to help evacuate as many civilians as we can. Time is against us though, and there are so many of them. The heat of the flames, it saps at our strength, until our body becomes heavy as our lungs fill with smoke.
Hero! Hero! Can you hear me? I am relieved. I found you.
Astari, hurry! Evacuate the city before it burns!
Mia! Mia! Open your eyes, my queen! My love! You can't stay here any longer! We must escape through the portal!
The tree! They're burning the tree! The child! Save her! Leave me!
Never! I'll take you both! Astari, you've done all you can! Command the priest to come with us!
They will not go.
The Banshee murdered my son. Stole my kingdom. She will not cost me my beloved! May your goddess watch over you.
Astari Starseeker and the priestesses, they decide to stay behind, while we jump through a portal and leave behind the burning Teldrassil. Anduin is filled in on the news, and he is at a loss for words.
You have shown courage and heart, champion. On this, one of the Alliance's darkest days. My whole life, I've prayed for peace in this world, but that dream can never be realized so long as Sylvanas Windrunner leads the Horde. She expects this atrocity to crush our spirits, shatter our unity. But this I vow. The Alliance will endure, and the Banshee Queen's insidious reign will be ended.
As a reward, members of the Alliance, they received the smoldering reins of the Teldrassil Hippogriff, one of the last great armored hippogriffs to escape the burning of Teldrassil. It carried the last citizens it could to safety, before collapsing of exhaustion. And that's the War of Thorns campaign, which leads into Battle for Azeroth and the Siege of Lordaeron. Now I spewed my opinion on stream and during my reaction video, in which I had some problems with the storyline. You might have caught some of the sarcastic remarks that I made, but here's the thing. The Battle for Azeroth Collector's Edition, it has stories that are not so much short stories, rather they're 70-ish pages each, including artwork. The book, which if I got it right, should also become available online, it tells not so much a different story than what we see going down, rather a much more detailed one, up to the point where I seriously sit back, I scratch my head and I wonder, why don't we see this in-game? So one of my biggest complaints, that was the motivation behind this war. Sylvanas, she wants to stay alive, and she mentions Anduin by name, accusing him of things that she's been doing, and I would have much rather seen them use the Alliance as a whole, see some sort of threat there, not just Anduin that's been known to keep the peace. We also have past motivations as seen on the PTR that has been changed in between, but here's the motivation that they describe it as in the story A Good War. You are not Garrosh Hellscream. Why do you want to throw the Horde into the meat grinder again? Sylvanas' eyes did not waver, even in the face of his rage. If I dedicated myself to peace with the Alliance, would it last a year? Yes, said Saurfang curtly. How about 2 years? 5, 10, 50? Saurfang felt the trap closing in on him, and he did not like it. We fought side by side against the Burning Legion. That creates bonds that are not easily broken. Time breaks every bond. Sylvanas leaned across the table. Her words flew like arrows. What do you believe? Will peace last 5 years or 50? He leaned forward too, his face is inches away from hers. Neither blinked. What I believe doesn't matter, War Chief. What do you believe? I believe the exiles of Kil'jaeden will never forgive the Horde for driving them away. I believe the living humans of Lordaeron think it's blasphemy that my people still hold their city. I believe the ancient divide between our allies in Silvermoon and their kin in Darnassus is not easily mended. There was a smile on Sylvanas' face. It was not a pleasant one. I believe the Darkspear tribe hasn't forgotten who drove them from the islands, she continued. I believe every orc your age remembers being imprisoned for years in filthy camps, wallowing in despair and surviving on human scraps. I believe every human remembers the tales of the terrible Horde that caused so much destruction in its first invasion. And I believe they blame every orc for that, no matter what your people have done to redeem yourselves. And I remember very well that my first Forsaken were once loyal Alliance citizens. We died for that banner, and our reward was to be hunted as vermin. I believe that there will be no permanent peace with the Alliance, not unless we win it on the battlefield on our terms. And believing that, answer this, Saurfang. What use is delaying the inevitable? The boy in Stormwind will not start a war tomorrow, Saurfang said, his eyebrows lowered. With Ken Greymane in his ears? We will see. That was a concern, Saurfang had to concede. In the thick of fighting against the Burning Legion, Greymane had launched a mission to kill Sylvanas. He had gotten some of Stormwind's few remaining airships destroyed. There were whispers that Greymane had ordered an attack without Anduin's permission, but as far as Saurfang knew, Greymane had not been punished. The implications of that were troubling, and every possible explanation, it led to the same conclusion. The old Worgen would always drive the Alliance towards war against the Horde. Sylvanas' eyes glittered, and the boy is becoming a man. What if the man decides that he has no choice but to launch a war on us? There's a bit more, but you get the idea, right? They use the history between the Alliance and Horde to motivate it. In their mind, even 100 years of peace, that would be a coward's bargain if they could claim dominance, secure peace by force. Of course, you could argue that if time breaks all bonds, then what's stopping them from causing another war once they actually claim dominance? You could argue that words might bring them greater profit. You could argue that Order Halls still need a better explanation for turning on each other. But man oh man, is this so much better than what was portrayed in-game? Then the game plan, their tactics, it's still similar. Capture the tree and take out Malfurion, but it's explained in greater detail. The plan is to capture the World Tree to splinter the unity amongst the Alliance. They would seek vengeance, of course, but they would have citizens hostage. They would not dare to strike at the Undercity for fear of their own people. It would even take them years to muster a fleet to attempt to do so. How would Gilneas respond to the Alliance reclaiming Teldrassil before the home of the Gilneans? infighting, Anduin in his new role of High King having to deal with a political crisis. The respect that the others give him, that's a courtesy and not an obligation. If the Alliance will not march as one, each nation will act in its own interest. Each army will simply return home to protect their lands from the Horde. One single victory, it would cripple the Alliance for years. It would destroy them from within. Then they could strike peace with the individual nations and carve them away from the Alliance, piece by piece.
Dismantle
the Alliance. Calculating, cunning, and it might actually work. We do read in Elegy, which is the Alliance side of things, that their expectations, they would fail regardless of outcome, as Anduin speaks with Greymane. And what of Gilneas? What will you say to me if I choose to help the Kaldorei first? Which he would, especially if the Horde threatened thousands of prisoners, and Gen knew it. I cannot act if the Alliance is divided, Anduin said. That's what this action is intended to do, Gen. Not just take Darnassus, but to use it against us, striking at the very heart of what makes our kingdom the Alliance. Sylvanas is going to turn us against one another. That is the grand plan, and I was a fool for not to see it earlier. Gen was silent for a long moment. When did you learn so much about strategy? Anduin laughed humorlessly. I was reading when I should have been sparring. Well, you are a fool. Anduin turned to regard him, surprised by the words. A fool to think for a moment that I would withdraw my support because you are helping the Kaldorei. Do I want my kingdom back? My people to return to their homes? Of course I do. Do I want it badly enough to allow innocent Night Elves to suffer when they so generously have helped the Gilneans these last few years? When they mitigated the Worgen curse so we could hang on to ourselves and not get lost in madness? When they fed us, sheltered us, and offered us their home where we had nothing? Gen made a dismissive noise, somewhere between a huff and a snarl. No, I would never betray that kindness by turning my back on them now. Sylvanas certainly doesn't understand the Alliance. She is in for a rude awakening, and you can mark my words. I mark your words, Gen Greymane, and my heart is full to hear them. They are a beacon in a time of terrible darkness. Both men turned to see Tirana standing in the doorway, still dressed in her priestess's robes. So yeah, union amongst the Alliance, but a much more understandable motivation and battle plan for the Horde. Unfortunately, those last moments, the passing the kill on to Saurfang and deciding to burn the World Tree, they haven't really improved in my opinion. The motivation for burning, that is described as inflicting the wound that Malfurion's death was supposed to cause. But since Saurfang refused to kill him, she had to do something else, and in that moment, she decided to give the order. Saurfang screams for them to stop firing. This is not their way. This is not what he signed up for, but it's already too late. The screams continued. They reminded him of Shefref. He had loved the sound then. Smoke filled the air, reminding him of Stormwind, of racing through the streets as buildings burned all around him, finding cowering humans and butchering them as they begged for their lives. He had loved the slaughter then, demon blood pumping in his veins, and he had loved this war too, hadn't he? Saurfang did not move for hours, not until the screams faded and the flames had burned themselves down to embers. Before him stood a smoking husk that had once been a great civilization. Inside him was a feeling of despair, a feeling of shame. There was no haze of corruption now to soften the horror. Saurfang would remember this moment in his dreams forever. He would relive his shame and all the new ones to come, over and over again. You have led your horde in service of death, Malfurion had said. How could Saurfang face the soldiers he had led into the war? How could he explain what they had done? He couldn't. He would never know how, but the burden would be his. Always, until his dying day. As Saurfang turned away, he hoped that day would come soon.
Do not grow old, if you can help it.
The campaign itself in its entirety, it actually describes the Night Elves with a lot more bite, a lot more mini skirmishes here and there, and fighting back, rather than saying in the midst of battle that they don't even want to fight. The ending is absolutely heart-wrenching when they figure out that the battle that they knew from the start would be near impossible to win, that the battle is not going to end in an occupation, but in a roaring fire, genocide of their people. Mia, who spent her time until the final moment saving as many citizens as she could, she is saved by Gen at the last moment. In her arms is the last child of the Kaldorei to be saved from Teldrassil. They named it Vinel, the last, and the priestesses who remained behind held their people close. Astari asked the Loon for one final blessing, not for healing or for rescue, but for mercy. And their goddess heard them, as a starry began to sing. Sleep brushed her mind, feather soft, honey sweet. The pain disappeared, and she let out a sigh. All around her, she heard similar sounds. There would be no pain in the lady's light, in the lady's love. Mother and child both slept, breathing gently despite the smoke. Her duty faithfully discharged, a starry allowed her own eyelids to flutter closed. There will be justice one day, but eyes other than ours will behold it. The last thing she heard was a cracking sound as she slipped into slumber.